Hi, Sean.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Okay.
How are
Yeah, I'm trying to zoom out, zoom in. Let's try zoom in. Oh, there they are.
you?
I'm trying to narrow this screen so it's just focused only on us. Okay, and now for some reason I have to put the chat somewhere else. Okay, so that looks good so far.
I have a headset for this.
I don't think you need one. If we find out we have echo, you can get one, but at the moment it doesn't look like we need one. And okay, I think this should be working. So what I'm going to do is, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine.
Great. Okay. So I don't know if Melissa has another computer, but you guys can, she can watch on another computer the live stream so that she can tell you how everything's looking if you want.
Okay.
You just go to projectcamelot.org and click on, just scroll down and click on the poster. It takes you to Project Camelot TV, and you scroll down to, she'll see the live stream picture of you. And there's
Okay.
What happens is, this will be recorded, and then other people will also be able to watch it, even if they're not tuned in right now.
Okay.
And people type questions into the chat, and they're able to ask you questions as well.
Okay. Can I pull away?
Okay, and you are live right now.
Okay.
And we've got people tuning in, so that's good. Looks like there's a commercial playing on because we don't pay for this channel, we can't avoid little commercials happening every now and then.
All right. I can't see you.
Okay, yeah, I haven't figured out what to do. Okay, so hold on.
Can I have an amazingly glamorous model picture just of me rather than actually me?
Well, the whole idea is for people to see your face and your reactions, and I mean, it's more like being in the room with you.
Picture glows when you talk. It's very neat.
It glows. Oh yeah, it vibrates or whatever kind of thing. Well,
it's your
it's alive. It's alive.
Yes.
Now I'm actually going to record this on film at the same time because I don't trust live stream. Because if we have technical problems, then sometimes it makes things disappear. So
The headphone.
Can you hear me okay, Sean?
I can hear you perfectly.
Great.
I do, actually.
Okay, for some reason my video isn't coming up. It should be,
Okay.
but it's not. I mean, that's okay. It's more important that people see you than that they see me in this instance. So
Like what? Okay. Okay, never mind.
We can do it.
Never mind.
We just tell them right here.
It's all right. It's okay.
Yeah, you should be okay. Okay, so we can start. I'm not gonna. I'm just gonna start from here. I'm not gonna turn it off again and on again. At the moment, you look good, Melissa. You're in the frame. I guess you know that.
Yes, I know. Hold on one second. We just need to change a couple of things here. Testing 1, 2. Can you hear me better?
Okay, you have sort of a pink or a red light on you, Sean. I don't know if you have any way of changing your lighting, or if you even
That's fine.
want to, but it's up to you. Okay, so let's just start and go with it at the moment. So, Sean David Morton, it's very nice to have you on my show, and this is Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. Unfortunately, my video is not, I don't know, the computer doesn't seem to have enough juice to put me on the screen at the moment, so we'll bear with that until it shows up. At some point, it may resolve itself, but for the moment, it's not showing up. But
okay.
You can hear my voice okay, and I can hear yours, and you are on live stream, live, as it were. And looking very good. So it's lovely to talk to you. And finally, we get a chance to sit down and actually do an interview. We do have people watching, and they will be able to ask questions in the chat from time to time, so we can pause every once in a while and do that. But basically, this is going to be recorded on live stream, and I'm also recording this using a normal sort of video camera, just in case we have some technology issues, which I have had from time to time. Okay, so Sean, I'd love you to introduce yourself, because there are some people that don't know who you are, and I know that's hard to believe because you're so well known. And you've been on Coast to Coast for many, many, many years, and Sean is a very well-known psychic, intuitive, and well, he's an author, he's a filmmaker, he's been on television. He really started out in the early days with UFOs, and really covers the gamut. He's been around a very long time. He doesn't look it, but he has been. And,
I sure feel it, but
and I'd love you to just kind of start at the beginning, because this is a 2-hour interview with you, and so we have some time here to really go down some different roads.
Okay, well, I think that says it all. I hate blabbing on about myself. It's usually much better to get into the, for me, to get into the conversation and get into the information and get information out there to people. It's just,
well, there are people that haven't met you
right now, which is really great. Which is we've got 3 books now in the works. Book that we just published, which actually I wrote 2 years ago with Wayne Haley, is called Veil of the Antichrist, to Pray in Cordoba, and it predicted pretty much everything that's going on in the Middle East, and talked about the collapse of various governments in the Middle East that would then become another caliphate, a Muslim empire, if you will. And so it was kind of like taking Nostradamus quatrains about the third great Antichrist and the guy in the blue turban, if you will, and then meshing that with current politics of what was going on. And it predicted, in essence, the book, which is available now, Veil of the Antichrist to Pray in Cordoba, predicted the collapse of all these various governments and the rise of an Islamic holy man, the Mokwana, or the 12th Imam, or the Veiled Prophet, and about how he unites Islam together and then marches across Islam to retake Cordoba, Spain, which is where the Muslims ruled much of the world, actually, in what was called the Golden Age of Islam, from about the 9th to about the 12th century or so. So that was Veil of the Antichrist. We wrote it like 2 years ago, and we couldn't get it published because everybody thought that the scenario in it was too outrageous and too outlandish, and all these governments aren't just going to fall, and there's not going to be some holy man that's going to step into it. And now here we are. Exactly everything that was predicted in the book is now, in fact, happening and all coming down. The other book that we have out there now, myself and my writing partner, Dr. Wayne Haley, is a memoir of a man in black. About 2 years ago, we received from the estate of a man who, they didn't say died, but moved on. A man who was a real man in black, a person that had been feeding us information from the inside about everything from super technology to extraterrestrials to planetary defense systems to what was going on at Area 51. So the book is called Sands of Time, and it's a 40-year memoir of a character named Dr. Ted Humphrey. That was the one thing we had to change in the book. We had to, under the agreement with the estate, we had to change the name of the man that we got the material from, because he still has a wife and a daughter that are living, but it describes his experience when his father disappears when he's 17 years old, and then he graduates from USC and then goes to Caltech and gets absorbed into the Montauk Project and is involved in early experiments with time travel in the early 1960s, and how this man actually rises up into a number of different top secret programs like Area 51 and all the things that were going on at Groom Lake, with the back engineering of saucers to a war or a conflict that went on between the United States government and apparently some extraterrestrials inside the Dulce Archuleta Mesa, to the current round of time travel experiments basically going on at Fallon Air Force Base in Reno, Nevada. So Sands of Time is out there. It's actually it's kind of a rare edition, because we've printed a few to get out there to just kind of friends and family and fans, but it's in the process of getting picked up by a very major publisher, and we're working on a 13-part miniseries right now, which we're going to pitch to some some television executives and all.
Awesome.
And then one other book that we're getting.
Sean, 1 second before you continue, I want to know, is what you're saying is that the book itself is based on the truth, though, that this man really does exist?
Well, part of this is that another thing about this, that not only did the person actually exist, but as part of the science that he gave us, and this was part of the ground-shaking part of this, part of the science that he gave us as part of this to prove that that we weren't just pulling people's leg, is he actually gave us the mathematical equation of the unified field theory. And so we now have a United States patent pending, not only on the unified field theory, but also on an application of the unified field theory, which is called the superluminal gravitational communication system, which we've been approached by some pretty major people on. It would be basically a global instantaneous communication system that would allow for instantaneous communication and transmission of virtually unlimited data, voice, video, whatever else, and distance is no challenge. You can actually instantaneously communicate, whether or not it's between you and I, and whether or not I was on Earth and you were on Pluto. You could instantaneously communicate, and it doesn't break the special or general theories of relativity, because it's actually using a folded space-time continuum application of the unified field theory. So in Sands of Time, we actually put the unified field theory and the explanation of how it came through, and some explanations of how Einstein actually came up with it, that he actually scribbled it on a piece of paper right before he died, actually in his office at Princeton, actually saw the equation and fell over dead, and they actually pulled the piece of paper out from underneath his head. And they've been using this now for many, many years inside the secret government. So people that want to know everything there is to know from about 1960 on, as far as what the reasons and rationales behind all of these things were, it is literally an insider's memoir of a man in black. So it's actually very cool, because we got one of the best agents in the business, Jeff Herman, and they just handed it to one of the top editors in the business, and they're talking about major publishing company actually picking it up and taking it over. So that's so that's some good luck, some good news about it. And then the last book that we're working on finishing up, that New Page Press is we're writing a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to Astral Travel. Everything you always wanted to know about getting out of your body, but were afraid to ask. So that's going to be a book about astral travel and about spiritual exercises and all that. So that's the writing aspect of it. Sands of Time, Veil of the Antichrist, and Hitchhiker's Guide. Sands of Time and Veil of the Antichrist are available. If you want to get it over the internet, you can go on my website. SeanDavidMorton.com, SeanDavidMorton.org. And the other book will probably be available after the first of the year. So that's that. And as far as I go, I'm looking to be possibly directing another movie this summer, possibly, and just been speaking at a lot of expos. and volunteering my time with A Better LA, which is Pete Carroll's charity to help inner city kids and kind of counsel them, because my PhD is in therapeutic psychology and therapeutic counseling, actually. So it's been really rewarding for me to work with the guys over in West Adams and the people, and try to make the area around the University of Southern California better, and do what I can do to contribute to the school, and its purpose and its mission, which is to help people. So
That's great.
That's what I've been working on. And I'm a little tired today because I drove all day. I was visiting family in Reno, and I've been on the highway all day, so I'm a little subdued. And I was rushing home just so I could get on the Skype with you and put on my little tie and get all dressed up for you.
Yeah,
So,
very, very impressive, I must
there we
say.
go.
Okay, Sean. Well, just for people that aren't familiar with your background, and I know it's hard for you to go all the way back there, but I still think that some of those stories are worth telling, and I like to have you get credit where credit is due, because I think that, as you've titled your book, The Sands of Time, a lot of this stuff that you've done in the past has kind of gone by the wayside and been forgotten about. I know you were on Coast to Coast with Art Bell in the early days, probably, nonstop. I don't even know how many times a year you would be on there. And you've also got a record of psychic hits that you've made over the years, and I'd like you to talk about that.
Okay. Well, when Coast to Coast first started out in '91, it goes all the way back to the beginning of the phenomenon of Coast to Coast. Art Bell was just kind of a guy in the middle of the night that was sort of a right-of-center political talk show host. And when we started going out to a place called Area 51, let me see, the evolution of Coast to Coast is kind of interesting, because in 1990, I worked on a documentary series called UFO Contactees, and it was executive produced by Joe Randazzo, and Richard Kashansky was our cameraman, and we traveled around the world for about 4 months doing the most extensive documentary actually ever done at that time on the UFO contactee movement, or people that have been contacted by UFOs. Anybody had a dog barked at a UFO, we went out and talked to them, and we talked to scientists, researchers, contactees, abductees, and we traveled all around the world in the early part of 1990. But we went to Canada, up and down the East Coast, went to South America, went to England. We were in England when the modern crop circle phenomenon was beginning, camping out in the fields. Went to Billy Meyer's farm in Switzerland. Met Dr. Anthony Ribera in the Humo case in Spain. Went up and down Italy to Genoa, the Fortunato Zanfretta case. All these massively famous cases in Europe. The Alice Haggerty case in Cape May, New Jersey, who was being abducted and taken on board craft and being used as a breeder.
What happened?
We put about 600 hours of video together of all of these individuals, and then one of the people, just to bring it back around to Art Bell and Area 51, that we interviewed was a scientist named Bob Lazar, and Lazar at that time had just kind of defected from Area 51, and he said, well, look, you don't have to believe anything I say. Go out to the 18-mile marker on Highway 375 by this mailbox on Wednesday nights about dusk, between about 6:30 and 9:30, and you'll see them test. You don't have to believe what I say. So a year later, in February 25th, I think it was, of 1991, it was kind of weird because it was the anniversary. It was the anniversary of the Battle of Los Angeles, which they made a movie out of, which happened on February 25th of 1942, when this big UFO parked itself pretty much over Culver City, Playa del Rey, Marina del Rey, and just hung there for hours while the military bounced like thousands of rounds of ammunition off this thing. But I took a friend of mine who was a reporter from the LA Times, and some other friends out there, and she was in a car with a reporter ahead of us, and myself and my other buddy Jeff. We're in a car and literally almost got hit by this UFO. This thing came right down in front of us, stood on its edge, started swirling around, doing all kinds of crazy things. We smashed the car into the side of the road. We ran after it. We got our faces all burned by it when it started coming towards us, and it lit up and made this kind of ringing sound, and then kind of shot off. And we ran back to the car and drove all the way back down to the road. And the people that have been going out there since November, December were Anthony Hilder, Noory Gary Schultz. I mean, they were kind of the diehard guys that had been there like November, December. I didn't get out there until February of '91 or so. But we watched this thing bounce around in the bounce around in the valley for the better part of a couple of hours from a ways away, and then the next day, February 26th, it appeared on the front page of the Los Angeles Times, and that very much brought Area 51 out of the shadows and into the light of day. The only place that was open with a telephone was this place called the Little Ailey Inn that was run by lovely people, Joe and Pat Travis. And we started literally getting on the payphone and calling this guy Art Bell because he was the only person we could pick up on our radio, and he was the only guy that was actually on that late at night. And we started calling Art about all these adventures we were having out at Area 51. And Art just became fascinated with it. And as I started to call in, my relationship with Art kind of evolved because I was more of a kind of a spiritual and intuitive psychic that was just that had stumbled onto Area 51. And in May of '91, I found this hilltop that actually looked down on the base, and I realized that I could climb up this hill, which was on public land, and look right down their throats. And some very strange stuff happened that day, and there was a huge sandstorm that was actually epicentered at Area 51, and there were helicopters that crashed, and Vegas blacked out, and all kinds of very, very weird stuff happened the day that I actually found this hilltop, which was like May 30th, I think, of '91. A couple of weeks later, myself and a friend of mine, Fred Isles, and I went out, snuck up there, hit in the rocks, and actually filmed things going on at the base, which also included this really funky bright light that used to actually come in every morning, Thursday morning at about 4:50 a.m., and which we learned was actually what some people thought was a UFO actually was just this plane that was coming in and lighting up and then coming down and then landing at the base. But sometimes it was a plane that would light up and come in, and other times there was another object that would pop up at 4:50 a.m. that would then juke around and do all kinds of crazy things. But on this particular occasion, this video, which always pains me because it's shown on virtually every TV show that's ever been done on Area 51, has my footage in it. And I don't know how they stole it, but shows that plane. And I've been accused of, it's a hoax or a fake or whatever, and I've never said anything other than the fact that it's been a plane. You hear us on the tape going, it's just a plane. But they show it because it looks all spooky in the fog and whatever else. But we had other video of the ships moving around and all that. So, my jumping up and down about this thing for a while literally turned Area 51 into an international phenomenon. And I took a lot of celebrities out there and film directors and things that led to the movie Independence Day, and we took the cast of the writers for The Simpsons out there, and I took Betty Thomas, who was a very famous director. I mean, a lot of people just kind of got on board with this, and I just thought it was fun. I was just going out every couple of weeks, and people said, well, put something together. So we used to put these vans together, and everybody kind of pitch in, and we'd go out there and start spending the night, and then everything got moved in '93. So we were out there for about 6 months or so without seeing a thing, and then we finally just kind of gave up, realizing a lot of stuff had been moved to Utah. And in that period of time, then Art Bell, my relationship with Art Bell and Coast to Coast sort of kind of blossomed because Art was starting to let me talk about my predictions, and he had heard about how I predicted the San Francisco earthquake in 1989. I'd made the predictions on the air months in advance about the Northridge earthquake. I said it was going to happen in Northridge. I gave the epicenter. I gave the magnitude. I think I actually missed the exact date of the quake by about 10 days. Because of that, I got all kinds of death threats and whatever else. So over the course of this, Art's show at its height was being listened by 26 million people around the world, and that actually comes from the statistics from Clear Channel when they bought it. But 26 million people. It's certainly the current host certainly doesn't have that many people on it now, but it's which is really kind of a shame that the show has gone down as much as it has. But so that's what's going on, and it gave me a chance, not only in my Delphi Associates newsletter, to write down my predictions, to say, look, this is what I'm predicting. Here it is in black and white, and then get on the air in front of 26 million people and make a prediction. Which I think had Art kind of scared. I mean, it got to the point where I would say things on the radio and they would happen and so dramatically occur exactly the way that I was talking about, that Art started to be kind of the opinion that, well, Sean, I don't know if you're predicting it and it happens, or because you say it in front of this many people that it happens because you say it. So he started sort of muzzling me on some of the predictions. And I said, well, you have all these other guys on that make all these crazy predictions about the end of the world and whatever else. And he said, well, yeah, Sean, but, we all know they're full of crap, and the stuff you say happens and the stuff they say doesn't. So, but anyway, that led to a relationship with Art over many years until Art, retired in 2003. Which actually, let me do this because it'll link into, I think, what we're talking about. It'll sort of highlight the Art Bell and the predictions and what you're seeing happen in the news and everything that I've seen happen over the last week or so with what's been going on with the current administration and foreign affairs. It's literally made me like throw up in my brain a little bit. I'm literally becoming like apoplectic every time I watch the news, like screaming at the news because there's so much vitriol and so much bile and so much hate and so much I can't stand it anymore. So let me give you an interesting thing here about my relationship, if you will, with Osama bin Laden. In 1992, I wrote a manuscript which was called The Millennium Factor. And in 1992, in this manuscript, I had a vision of a man in the future around the turn of the century, the 21st century, that was going to be a great antichrist, that was going to be a terrorist, that was a person that was going to terrorize the world. And I saw him holding up his fist with a red ring. And I had worked with this friend of mine, Stephen Hills, the late, great Stephen Hills, who was a police artist, to actually come up with the face of this man that I kept seeing with this red ring that was threatening the world. And I actually had under it, at the top of it, I made it look like a wanted poster where it said, wanted, dead or alive, the Antichrist on it. And I had all these predictions about this man that was going to be terrorizing the West, that was going to be, Islamic, and have something to do with this. So years later, in 1994, as part of an experiment that I did that had to do with remote viewing about 100 years in the future. And this is one of the things that I was one of the pioneers of a technique called remote viewing, and this had to do with a series of techniques that were developed by Dr. Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff and Ingo Swann at the Stanford Research Institute. Well, Russell's daughter, Elizabeth Targ, Dr. Elizabeth Targ, and I dated for quite some time, and we began to expand on Russell's work, and I took their scientific methods and modalities of how to teach people to have psychic powers and be able to see things remotely from them in time and space, and then put it with my spiritual training, because I had lived in a monastery in Nepal. I'd actually studied with the Dalai Lama in Dharamsala in 1986 for about the first 3 months of the year or so, and then I actually lived in a monastery in Nepal for about 8 months or so after that. So I started combining my Eastern training with these Western techniques that they were calling remote viewing. And Elizabeth and I were coming up with some fantastic things. I mean, we were learning how to predict the stock market and learning how to predict roulette wheels. We could go to Vegas and win like thousands of dollars using this technique. So it was pretty fun. So in the course of this, in 1994, one of the techniques that I learned when I was in Nepal had to do with what we call a Tibetan soul transference. And in essence, it means moving along the timeline, not only of your past lives and existences, but being able to go into the future to your future lives and existences. So to make a long story short, what I did is I went forward 100 years or so and traded places with myself further down the timeline, whereas I, from 100 years in the future, came back and spoke to a crowd of about 1,000 people or so at the Anaheim Learning Life Foundation. And this was a recorded conversation that was then later transcribed. Well, the remarkable thing about this is that the transcription of this session became legendary because it predicted so many things that were happening in the future. So getting around back to Osama bin Laden again and all that, in 1994, sorry about the long story, in 1994, in that transmission, myself in the future, if you will, whose name is Vajra, actually from 100 years from now, said that in 2001 there would be attacks on Washington, D.C. and New York City by an organization called the Islamic Jihad, and that these Islamic attacks on New York and Washington would then lead to the United States going to war in the Middle East, which would then lead to basically the bankruptcy of the United States, and the United States going, and remember, at that time, this is 1994, the economy was booming, we were experiencing the longest period of peace in our history. I mean, there was a 10-year period in which there was just nothing but money being created and computers, and it was the longest period of peace in human history, from 1991 until approximately 2001 or so. But the specifics of the prediction were terrorist attacks in New York and Washington, D.C. that would then lead to the collapse of the United States government, the bankruptcy of the United States, a nonstop wars in the Middle East, which would then lead to civil wars in the United States because of the collapse. So all these things came down, bing, bang, boom. So when the September 11th attacks happened, okay, moving forward a little bit, in late 1997, early 1998, they started talking about this guy, Osama bin Laden. And the minute I saw his face, I identified him as the guy who I was trying to draw the painting of in 1992. So in my newsletter, in I think January of 1998, I ran my picture from the wanted Dead or Alive from 1992 next to Osama bin Laden's face, and actually you could tell they were the same person except without the beard, with my saying, look, this is the guy that I'm seeing. This is the person that is going to be responsible for terrorist attacks in the United States, and this is the person that's he's going to use airplanes. He's going to use the aeronautic infrastructure of the United States to do something that has to do with airplanes. It's going to have to do with Washington and New York. So then progressing ahead on this, obviously then the September 11th attacks occur. They pin it on Osama bin Laden. I am also, let me say the caveat of this, that when after the attacks occurred within 4 days of my newsletter, I was the first person to be saying that this is a conspiracy. This is not what it looks like. There was information from the inside that was saying that this was that this was basically a setup, and all the inside things and all the conspiracy stuff is right. But when you're looking at something psychically and you're trying to see something in the future, you just see kind of the big picture.
Right.
So I go on Art Bell. This is a very interesting thing. Because of my work with remote viewing, I was contacted by some people in the Pentagon. Specifically, I worked for two lady colonels inside the E-ring of the Pentagon who had put together something called Project Foresight. And Project Foresight was using, and it wasn't just me. I think I got tapped into it through a friend of mine who knew the colonel who was looking for this. They're putting the same kind of program together now, by the way, through not DARPA, which is the Defense and Advanced Research Projects Agency, but through IARPA, which is the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency, where they're now, once again, looking for psychics and looking for people that are willing to work with the military and do whatever. So it wasn't just me. I was just one person with a whole group of people, but what they would do is that they would give you a series. If you're familiar with remote viewing, they'd give you a series of coordinates, and then you'd spit back information at them, and if your information rang a bell with what it was they were doing, they would start giving you more information and feeding you more things and basically expand your role in it. So one of the things that I did was that they specifically wanted to know where a target was going to be at a specific period of time. And I was the one that figured out that this was Osama bin Laden that they were talking about. And what they wanted to know is the longitude and latitude. They wanted to know a location and a window of time where he would be at a certain place at a certain time, out in the open, literally. And so one of the things I saw, and this was December, this was after the attacks, but this was somewhere around mid-December, so about December 15th when I did this for the Project Foresight guys, I predicted that bin Laden, with a group, a caravan of people, would be traveling through a particular pass near the city of Khost in Afghanistan at a particular longitude and latitude. And the time window I saw for this was January 25th to February 5th, that he would be in this location at that time. The problem when you're viewing things in the future is it's very, very tricky and almost impossible to get an exact time frame for what it is you're looking at. And I came up with a technique, literally using all kinds of different things like pendulums and feelings and working with maps and whatever else, and understanding how these waves kind of ebb and flow to at least be able to come up with a window, a time frame window, as to when this was going to occur, which I've been pretty good at it in giving the timing of everything from earthquakes to natural catastrophes and whatever else.
Okay, so but what year were you talking about?
This was 2001. This was December of 2001.
Okay.
Okay, so in December 2001, and I said, well, is this classified? And the colonel said, well, not really. And I got on Art Bell's program, and I talked a little about Project Foresight. And on December 28th, people can go back and check the archive if they like, but on December 28th, on that show, and it was kind of funny because Melissa and I were actually in Las Vegas, and we were doing remote viewing to actually win. I think we'd won like $13,000 at the roulette table doing the remote viewing techniques. And so we turned like $1,000 into like 13 grand, and we were doing really well. But on December 28th of 2001, I told Art about the Project Foresight experience, and I said, look, Bin Laden's going to be at a particular place in a longitude and latitude between January 25th and February 5th. And you're going to see, some big stuff in the news where I think they're going to get him, and I think they're going to, kill him, or something's going to happen at that period of time. Well, lo and behold, remarkably enough, on February 5th, the military announces, and once again, you guys, all you internet weasels out there can check this if you like, but on February 5th, the military announces that they were tracking a caravan of people moving through a passing coast that they believed was Osama bin Laden and his crew, and that they struck this caravan with a predator drone and basically blew them up. And now what they were doing is that they had gone to the scene where they'd blown up this caravan, and they had collected tissue samples and blood from they collected the bodies, but also tissue samples and blood from the scene. And on February 5th, they were asking members of the bin Laden family to provide DNA so that they could actually match the tissue samples and the blood with his family. And it was actually confirmed that they actually found some blood and tissue samples from Osama bin Laden, which led the military to believe that they had struck the caravan and hit him, but that either his body was taken away or he somehow got out alive. Now, I heard, after this period of time, I heard a couple of different stories. I had heard that bin Laden had actually been cornered in a safe house in Afghanistan, and that a Delta Force team went in, and he managed to escape underneath the house with a series of tunnels, and they blew up the house and killed a bunch of our guys going in. But that he eventually died of wounds inflicted from this at some point around late April, early May. Later on, these intelligence people told me no, he actually died from renal failure, from the failure of his kidneys, and that he died actually not only from renal failure but also from injuries that he got from the February 3rd attack, and that he had actually died in March of 2002. Now, it is interesting because now with all the current fuss about our supposedly, in quotes, killing bin Laden, you'll check on the internet and you'll find that bin Laden apparently is actually part cat, because he's got 9 lives, and there's been 9 different reports of how he's been dead and alive and dead and alive and dead and alive. I mean, this is like they should reshoot Weekend at Bernie's and actually put Osama bin Laden as the star with, guys like moving him around.
Exactly. Oh God, so nuts. Okay.
So
yes.
Let me just progress forward to this. So that was that. So everybody told me that he was dead. Christopher Hutchins was saying he was dead with Vanity Fair magazine. All these experts were saying he was dead. They kept popping up with these ridiculous videos where they had fatty bin Laden and skinny bin Laden and all these tapes that the CIA was always saying were real, that the FBI would never confirm because they didn't want to get sucked into what was going on with CIA. So everybody from the Pakistani government was saying that he's been dead this whole time. Apparently what's been happening is that in March, apparently they must have gotten his body and put him on deep freeze somewhere. This was the theory, that they actually froze the guy. So he's literally like Frosty bin Laden. Frosty bin Laden was a terrorist, they say. Let me see, there's got to be a song in there somewhere. Frosty bin Laden was a terrorist, they say.
No, but also
for 9 long years.
Well, apparently there were I mean, he was employed by the CIA from day one, basically, and obviously the Bushes are huge good friends with his family and so on and so forth. So in the end, I believe that there was also the idea that there could be clones. There were clones created. So
well, I don't think it's that complicated. But let me just progress forward just to tell you some other things that we know.
Okay.
In March of 2003, this is just to give you an idea of how sneaky these guys are. In March of 2003, I think it was the exact same date. It was the anniversary of the date where Obama went into Libya, also without the permission of the U.S. Congress, which is an impeachable offense. I might also want to point out that the attack in Afghanistan on the compound is also an open and active war against a sovereign nation, also without approval from Congress or anybody else, which is also an impeachable offense. And nobody seems to point out the fact that we've literally gone in and conducted a military operation in foreign soil.
Right.
But in March, when we began the war against Iraq, which I believe was March 19th of 2003, we captured Saddam Hussein. And we captured Saddam Hussein somewhere around the 1st of April, actually, of that year. And we had Saddam Hussein literally on ice until they pulled him out of a rabbit's hat on December 3rd, where they pulled him out of the magic hat and said, oh, here you go, here's Saddam Hussein. Where they pulled him out of the magic hat on December 3rd of 2003. Now, here's what was interesting about this. I was actually shooting a huge documentary called Prophecy of the Pyramids, which I had written and I was hosting. And we spent about $500,000 on this thing, which was supposed to be a TV series called Challengers of the Unknown. And I was we'd spent about 2 months actually shooting in Egypt. We'd actually shot inside the Great Pyramid of Giza for a couple of weeks at night, which was actually really cool. And it was the same day when they pulled Saddam out of the spider hole, and the Marines had their boot on his head and the whole thing. That was the same day that they had busted into Michael Jackson's house. So it was an interesting kind of thing where Michael Jackson was on TV going, and they took pictures of my penis and my buttocks, and it wasn't even my good side. So so I'm in this Casbah, literally in the bazaar, and they're showing it on Al Jazeera, and everybody in this place is losing their mind. They're like, Turka, 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 And I said, why are they so upset? And my friend said, Mr. Abbas, actually, who was head of this film production company, said, well, it's as obvious to us that they captured Saddam. They captured Saddam in Hollywood. They captured him in Hollywood, and now they show him to us. And I said, what do you mean they captured him in Hollywood? And he actually said something to people and told everybody to calm down and, let me explain this to my American friend. And everybody shuts up. And he takes the clicker on the TV and he stops and he rolls it back. It was like one of these DVRs. And he stops it for a second. He says, tell me what you see in this picture. And I said, well, there's Saddam and there's a guy and there's some trees behind him with some flowers. And he says, yes, what kind of trees are those? And I said, they're date palms. And he says, and when do the date palms bloom? You know, my friend, you are very good. You spend much time in Egypt. When do date palms bloom in Egypt? And I said, well, they bloom in March and April. And I was like, hey, this picture was taken in March. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And then I got very upset as well. And
I love it.
Realized that all the photos of Saddam were taken in March and April. Then I'm in New York. This was literally 3 or 4 months ago. I'm in New York, and I'm on the Joey Reynolds Up All Night show, and Joey Reynolds has been a very good friend of mine, and I was on a TV show there. The producer of his show comes over to me. I'm not going to tell you his name, but, the producer of the show comes over to me, and he says, look, I was Special Forces in Iraq. I was in the Army, and I am telling you that you are absolutely right. I can confirm what it is you're saying, and I know that I've heard you on the radio say this before, but I was one of the guys that was beating the crap out of Saddam Hussein the first week of April, and I can tell you for a fact that we hung on to this guy for 9 months to give us an excuse to storm around the country and loot the museums and loot the banks and do whatever else. So now let's move forward to the Obama. It's so interesting how those two names are just becoming intertwined.
Go ahead.
If we move on to this, just off the top of my head, now you have to understand I've literally been on a mountain for like a week. I've not heard too much about this, so your audience might forgive me if I'm blowing some of the details here. But it is interesting to me.
With your encyclopedic mind, you're incredible, Sean. So for you to blow a detail is just almost next to impossible in my long knowledge of you. But go right ahead and give it a shot.
I just want to put this out to you and to your audience, and it used to be the job of the media to question things. And you and I both know, Carrie, that you're probably one of the last people out there. You know, you're the last of the lowest lanes, as they say, because obviously the media doesn't question things.
Right. Thank
Obviously,
you.
they eat up with a spoon everything that Obama and this administration just wants to vomit on them.
Yes.
And say, oh, isn't this yummy, this food you've created for us? And I think if you look at the trifecta of what's going on here with Obama, and let me just put some puzzle pieces out there for you, and you have this fantastic audience out there. And let your audience maybe come up with some conclusions or come up with some of this. I think this is kind of interesting. If you look back to 3 weeks ago, to when this started, and let's just give it until, say, April 1st. If you look at April 1st, and I was expecting a number of really interesting things to occur. Number one, Terrence McKenna came up with something called the Time Wave Zero software. And I knew Terrence. He lived in Half Moon Bay. I grew up in Northern California. We used to go over the hill and go to Terrence's house. All I can say is if you ever went to Terrence's house, you never ate the desserts because you never knew what was actually in the desserts. You know,
Yes.
You'd be there like 2 weeks and think, whoa, what did I just eat in that brownie? When Terrence was doing his Time Wave Zero software, I had one of the original copies of it on a floppy disk that I used to use in my old Mac Classic. And the latter part of this month, from about the 20th of April to about the 15th of May, is a massive spike in what they call a novelty wave or a novelty curve. And these novelty waves are becoming higher and bigger and bigger and bigger as we move through 2011 and then on to 2012. So if you look at the last couple of weeks, all of the novel things that have been going on. For example, you have Donald Trump, a billionaire worth arguably, $2.6 billion, is now actively going after the President of the United States to question as to whether or not he was actually born in the USA or not. Well, suddenly, even though Governor Abercrombie, one of the best friends of Barack Obama, says as of January 28th, I'm the governor and I can't find the birth certificate. There is no birth certificate. It doesn't exist. It's not here. Obama then turns around, just sends his lawyer and says, well, I just didn't get around to it till now. Bam, here's my long-form birth certificate.
Right.
Now, again, with no internet input, with nothing else, I looked at this birth certificate, so this is purely my opinion, because I work in the newspaper and magazine publishing industry, because I published a newsletter for 17, 18 years or so, because I work with Photoshop. This is one of the worst forgeries I have ever seen.
That's what I hear as well.
All I did was blow this up a little bit. And I'm just looking at it going, okay, there's a bunch of numbers on here that one of them's faded, two of them have been changed. Then I look at the security paper on the edge, and it's completely different. This is why they have security paper, so people can't monkey with documents. The edge of the paper is a completely different design as what's on the inside, which is blurry, which means somebody's laid it in. Then this isn't even a photocopy. It's a Photoshop document that's been layered, brought into Illustrator, flattened, and then turned into a PDF. And then if you look at the information on the birth certificate, just the information alone, those are the technical things that are wrong with it. If you look at the information on the certificate, that alone should be triggering a congressional investigation. For example, number one, I believe it was and I don't have it in front of me, but it was the Kilapani Gynecological and Obstetric and Pediatric Hospital, I think is what it said on it. This hospital did not exist until 1973, and it certainly was not named that when Barack Obama was born there in the 1960s. The other thing is that they listed his father, Barack Obama Sr. This is interesting because they had Ann Dunham, and then they had to write the word Stanley on top of it, like she'd forgotten her first name or something. And then Ann Dunham listed her race as Caucasian, but it lists Barack Obama Sr.'s race as African. Well, African is not a race. Africa is a place. He's Negro. And that is what they put on there, which means that the same politically correct people that put this together also put together the same laser copy fake that he put out there, which also said African on it, by the way. So just those things, the fact that the name of the hospital's wrong, the fact that it's African instead of Negro, the fact that you have numbers that have been actually switched to the top, there should be a congressional investigation upon this right now.
Well, also, not only, but I mean, putting out a forgery, if he did nothing else wrong in his whole regime, putting out the forgery and saying is lying to Congress and the American people, that's also a actionable offense. Just that alone.
Sure it is. Well, and again, and I'm not one of the birther guys because here's the and let me put it out there to people who are all going to jump up
Neither
and
am
down
I.
about this. It is a moot point. It is a waste of time because there are so many bigger and better things that people should be getting upset about. And
Right.
look, I'm telling you, this guy was born in Kenya. I am telling you, we don't know where the hell he was born. We don't really know who his real parents are. We don't know where. For all we know, this guy was born at midnight on 6/6/66 on the city of the Seven Hills in Rome of a jackal with a 666 on his forehead, and and now he's been shuffled off. I mean, if you look at Obama's history, I was going to write a comedy called Barry, because you could literally put this into a comedy, that this schlub, this guy who was a crack addict, this guy who had was on crack and chain smoked and flunked out of Occidental College, then goes to Columbia and then disappears. He's classmates with George Stephanopoulos for 3 freaking years, and George Stephanopoulos can't remember a well-spoken black guy that he supposedly went to school with at Columbia. Then he suddenly appears at Harvard, and he gets into Harvard and gets a full boat scholarship at Harvard because it's paid for by Min El-Sur, who's the finance minister for Saudi Arabia. Really? 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 And then he completely lucks out because he runs for Congress, he runs for Senate in Illinois, and the only reason he ran is because he was a Democratic sacrificial lamb, because nobody in their right mind was going to run against Jack Ryan, who was the Republican senator for Illinois. He was 18 to 26 points ahead in the polls. Suddenly, and this is my theory about how the Borg are responsible for Barack Obama. Have I ever told you my theory about how the Borg are responsible for Barack Obama? You want to hear it?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay, are you a Star Trek fan?
Not quite, but sort of, yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, for those people out there, for your geekosaur people who are Star Trek fans out there was a Star Trek show called Star Trek Voyager, and the Star Trek Voyager. Let me just briefly. Star Trek Voyager gets in a fracas with this being called the Caretaker that then shoots Voyager to the other side of the galaxy into the Delta Quadrant. As they're making their way home, they come in contact with the Borg. They capture a female Borg, pull off all her accoutrements, and put her in this gorgeous skin-tight suit. And she becomes Seven of Nine, who becomes part of their crew. Seven of Nine is played by this absolutely gorgeous actress named Jeri Ryan. Jeri Ryan decides that she's going to get a divorce from her husband because her husband apparently took her to a sex party in France. Of course, and that's an oxymoron right there, because just going to France is kind of a sex party. In and of
Stop
itself.
it.
Just walking around the streets of France is a
Oh,
sex party.
forget it.
Then
Okay,
a sex party in France where he supposedly forces her to kiss a girl and then divorces her husband. Well, somebody releases these documents, and as they release these documents about him supposedly going to the sex party, making his wife kiss a girl, the guy that she's married to just so happens to be Jack Ryan, who is the Republican senatorial candidate and Republican senator for Illinois, and he is forced to drop out of the race, and guess who wins the Senate?
Oh,
Barack Obama.
God. It's so sick. Okay, great.
He gives one speech at the Democratic convention, and 4 years later, this guy with 147 days of work experience, less experience than you need to run a Burger King, this guy becomes president of the United States. It's fascinating. It's amazing. It's stupendous.
Sean, you should have your own television show. You're just a hysterical person.
Carrie, the theory is that he not only knew personally, but worked for, ready for this, Osama bin Laden, because he spent time in Pakistan and Afghanistan in the early 1980s as a cutout agent for the Central Intelligence Agency.
Yeah, I've been hearing that lately.
Yeah. Oh
yeah,
because that's the case.
Yeah.
How does he get hooked up with? How does he get taken to dinner by the president of Afghanistan? How does he get hooked up with the finance minister of Saudi Arabia, who pays for his Harvard education? Because how does he go to Columbia and have nobody know who he is? Because he was a cutout. He tells us in his books that he went to Pakistan and Afghanistan because Americans couldn't go there, because he had a passport that said he was Indonesian. So if somebody wants to school the Donald on constitutional reality, you can't be. Forget about the birth certificate. If he was born in Hawaii, that's fine. But you can't be a dual citizen and be president of the United States either. and he gave up his he gave up his U.S. citizenship when his mother gave up her citizenship, and when he was adopted by Lolo Soetoro, when he was abandoned by his communist radical revolutionary
Okay. But let's get to some more important stuff, because I appreciate that. It's hilarious, and
But it
you
all
should.
links to Osama bin Laden. It all
I
links to what's
hear
going
you.
on
I
with Osama bin Laden.
absolutely. There's no doubt about it, and the absurdity is just everywhere. But let's
Okay.
talk about the Japanese issue, the nuclear fallout that's going on. Let's talk about that from your perspective. I'd like to hear your take on what you think triggered the earthquake and the subsequent meltdown over there, and what you
Okay.
think is the reason for it, because it appears to be part of a targeted job.
Okay, as long as you're telling me that your listeners aren't going to be mad for me telling you exactly what's wrong with what happened with the whole death of Osama bin Laden. You don't want to hear that part.
Well, no. Well, I mean, I take it as a given, but yeah, if there's a caveat to the final story, go right ahead and finish it.
Here's the caveat. I'm sorry I got off on that. Carrie, it's nice to talk to you because I've just been mad for the last 2 weeks. I've been
well, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to hear all of it. I love it. I just want to get to the really important matters, but go right ahead, please.
Right.
Please cover this.
Here's where it gets weird. I had Obama's plane literally fly over my head. I'm riding my bicycle along the beach here, and I actually went out there at about 9:30 in the morning to watch his plane, Air Force One, fly over me while I was there. Where was he 3 weeks ago? Supposedly, they hatched this plot 3 weeks ago. He became aware of this intelligence that Osama bin Laden was in this compound 3 weeks ago. Where did he go? He went to Hollywood. He visited film studios. He went, and here's your Japanese connection, he spent the day at Sony Studios. I want you to remember that because it's part of the puzzle piece. And part of the puzzle piece is he came to Los Angeles and met with studio executives here, supposedly at the same time that he was getting this intelligence about where Osama bin Laden was, which I think is very suspicious because it's starting to look very much like a wag the dog scenario.
Yes.
That whatever they claim happened there didn't actually happen, is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Because here's where it gets weird. It gets weird, first off, the fact that they get him on May 1st. And May 1st is the celebratory day of all communist nations around the world. It's the creation of the Bavarian Illuminati, which then founds the Chinese Communist, Russian Communist. So May Day is the day. And also the name May Day as an emergency term. That's number one. Number two, where Osama bin Laden supposedly is right next to, it is a 5-minute drive down the street to a gigantic Pakistani military base. You don't think they could have just picked up the phone and called the Pakistani military and said, could you pick this guy up for me? They're right across the freaking street, for God's sakes. No, he puts Kill Team 6 into action. I might also want to point out that not only does he visit Hollywood and Sony Studios at that time and have some very long conversations with studio executives, but about a month ago, Tom Clancy, who has not written a book in 10 years, puts out a book which is basically, I forget the name of it, but it's exactly the scenario.
Oh, really?
Tom Clancy is describing exactly Kill Team 6, finding bin Laden in a compound, and the whole 9 yards.
Right.
So there's where it goes. They send in here's where the forensics are completely off. They send in 2 helicopters, I believe it was. I was trying to look at the news here to see if it was 3 or not. But there's 2 helicopters that come in. One helicopter apparently is the most advanced piece of equipment we have. And you know why it's so super secret and so super amazing, Carrie? Because it's designed to apparently explode the minute that it lands. And that's exactly what happened.
Oh,
no. Because it lands inside the compound and explodes.
Oh,
so now they're trying to tell us that, and this is just the forensics, a Black Hawk helicopter has a pilot and co-pilot and has enough room on the inside for about 8 commandos on the inside. Remember, one of the helicopters exploded. They supposedly went into what they at first claimed was a multi-million-dollar compound where he was living in comfort. And yet you see the photos of this thing, and it literally looks like a taco stand in Tijuana. I mean, it's this ramshackle piece of crap slum. Then they have, and this is where it stops making sense, all right? Like the old song by the Talking Heads. There's 24 guys on the strike team. These 24 guys spent 40 minutes inside this compound, supposedly having a vicious firefight with the people in the compound. Apparently having a vicious firefight with apparently most of his wives and a couple of kids and whatever else. But they pull out 24 guys, including a dog. They have a hero dog as part of the story, because the dog somehow went in and like they trained him to bite anybody that smelled like hummus or something. And he goes in, and the hero dog. Have you seen the story tonight on the news about the
No,
hero dog?
I haven't seen that. No.
They have a hero dog, a German Shepherd, who goes in. 24 guys, a dead body, a hero dog, computers, boxes of files, etc., etc. How does this all fit on one helicopter? Think about it now. And they take it on one helicopter, supposedly. And here's the other thing. The Russians took photographs of the compound the day after this happened. There are no bodies. Where are the bodies? There are no shell casings. Supposedly there was this firefight. Are they cleaning up all the shell casings as well as they're going? So there's no shell casings. There's no body. There's some blood laying around. And here's the biggest thing. Everybody knows from the get-go that bin Laden has kidney failure. He should have been said, even if he was still alive, do they mention a dialysis machine anywhere? Think about it. Dialysis machines weigh about 1,200 pounds, and they're the size of a freaking steel refrigerator. And if he was still alive, he had to be processed on a dialysis machine basically every 2 to 3 days, which means he needs a doctor. He needs a medical supply.
Well, he was doing that down at the military base.
Is that what he was doing? Yeah. And again, I might also want to point out, aren't the Pakistanis our allies? Is there some reason why they didn't inform the Pakistan military, again, practically across the street, that he was right there? We have to send in a top secret team. We don't tell the Pakistanis. And now the Pakistanis are saying, you've attacked us. You actually executed a military operation on our soil, which means we want you out of our country now. Which means that they're kicking the United States out of Pakistan.
Well, that's what they wanted, but that's what they want anyway. They want a war between Pakistan and India. I mean, that's part of this whole scenario.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but what Peking did today is Beijing wrote a letter to the United States that basically said, if you do this again, that an attack on Islamabad is an attack on China. So now the Pakistanis have it's forced them to now align with the Chinese to stop the United States from doing this.
Yeah, well, I wrote a screenplay about that.
Yeah, interesting.
Several years ago.
Let's say they have Osama bin Laden. Well, okay, this is the first time that we've captured a terrorist, and we have not run photos of the terrorist within either minutes or hours. We had Uday and Qusay Hussein on ice for about 11 days before we actually burned them up. We had al-Zakari's photo all over everywhere. Every terrorist that we've shot or killed, we've taken photographs of and plastered all over the press. They showed the photos of a supposedly dead Osama bin Laden to 4 members of Congress. 2 members of Congress said, looks kind of like him, and the other 2 members of Congress say, I think they're fake. So they're 2 for 2 showing the photos. I'm not kidding. It was on the news. Scott Brown.
I know. I hear you. Okay. Can we now move on to Japan? I mean,
okay,
it's hilarious.
I'm telling you that what has happened with the wag the dog scenario, with the visits to the film studios, with, I believe, a staging of this, because remember, they built a set. They used the word set of the compound, not a mock-up of the compound, but a set of the compound, that I think this was enacted beforehand, probably on a Hollywood soundstage somewhere, to give them all the exciting graphics of this. They show this incredible photograph of all these people supposedly watching something where it looks like Hillary has her hand over her mouth in shock, and they had her on the news tonight saying, no, I have allergies and I was coughing. And no, I'm not in shock. I was going, I was coughing because of the allergies.
Well, if she was in shock, then it's not even her, because after what she's gone through, nothing shocks her. Okay.
But this thing will be the 9/11 as this begins to unravel and unfold. And when they took him to the ship, of course, if they had his body, they can't do an autopsy of him because they'll find that there are ice crystals in his blood, and this son of a bitch has been frozen probably since 2002. And of course, and I might say thank you so much that he got the same burial as JFK Jr. did, because that's another body that they don't want you to see. And now they're on there saying, well, we need to demolish the compound as quickly as possible because we don't want this to be a shrine for terrorists, which means already they're talking about getting rid of the evidence.
Yeah, exactly.
This conspiracy, this is the first time you're hearing this, by the way. This is exclusive stuff that comes from people on the inside. This conspiracy will be the 9/11 of Obama's administration, very much like 9/11 unraveled underneath the Bush administration. And on the Kerry Cassidy Project Camelot show, I am giving you a list of things that come from people inside the Pentagon who are shaking their heads going, oh my God, I can't believe they think they're going to get away with this. Oh my God, the forensics don't add up. The Russians are saying now that this is a complete hoax. They took photographs of the whole place.
I don't know why they want to make such fools of themselves. That's the issue. Where are they going with this? That's the issue. You see what I'm saying?
Here's where they're going with it. I'm telling you where they're going with it. They're going with the fact that they get rid of Bin Laden, and now we're talking about a massive terrorist attack in the United States within the next 3 months. That's what everybody inside.
One that they can substantiate that the reason why we've been fighting these guys for so long, et cetera, et cetera. I know. I heard this mainstream radio broadcast today where they're actually going, see, this is what they've been doing. I mean, it was unbelievable. The newscaster had completely bought and paid for the entire thing. He believed everything. It's shocking. It's it's just a tragedy. Okay. Thank you, Sean.
Okay, now let's talk about Japan. Okay, so that's that. I am telling you again. Now they're claiming they've got his 3 wives, but the forensics don't add up. The math doesn't add up. The crime scene doesn't make any sense. The evidence doesn't lead to what they're talking about. There's so many holes in this story. And again, there is no precedent in Islamic law that, well, we buried him under Islamic rules. There's nothing in Islamic law that says burying somebody at sea. But if they had his body, then it's been frozen since 2002, and they dumped him over the side. Maybe they showed him to somebody, but there's no way they could do a forensic autopsy on this body because they would find either ice crystals in it or find out he's been dead a really long time.
Well,
even if they, yeah, go ahead.
Also, Ed Dames was talking about him having been killed. And he talked about it on Coast to Coast anyway. And, for all the people that don't, look, I take Ed Dames, what he says with a grain of salt, no doubt. But he is right about some things, and he is reporting what the remote viewers had seen. And the fact of the matter is he was killed back in whatever it was, 2001 or 2 or whatever. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, again, I was on Coast to Coast on December 28th. And of 2001, and you can go check the archive if you want. And I told you when he was going to be hit. I told you when it was going to happen. I told the military where he was going to be as part of Project Foresight. They hit him, and I got on Coast again on that night because Art called me when the news came out, and I said, yeah, I don't think he's dead yet, but they winged him. They did something, and he's running around, and he'll probably be dead soon. And I was told by the Project Foresight guys, because they stopped asking me questions about him, I was told by the Foresight guys that he died sometime. They didn't have a confirmation, but he died sometime between March and the early part of May of 2002, and then that was the end of the conversation. They moved on to other things.
Yeah.
Okay, Japan. Let's relate this back to because I think the Japan story, and I've given you all the props and all the credit that I have in every talk that I ever give, is that Kerry Cassidy and Project Camelot, because of your relationship with a fantastic gentleman named Benjamin Fulford, did warn people that there was going to be a catastrophic event in Japan, and that this was going to happen. And I defer to you for the details of this, but as I understood it, in the November missive, I guess, or debriefing by Benjamin Fulford, although he may have been given some, possibly erroneous information, I think that he was saying that something about, and please correct me if I'm wrong on this because this is your field, that the White Dragons knew where the 1,000 people that made up the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Bush, Clinton crime syndicate were, and that unless they began to actively reshape the world positively and begin to release technology, that there would be like a night of the long knives, and within 48 hours they could wipe them all out. And he was saying that if they felt threatened, that they would cause, using HARP, a catastrophic event in Japan which would destroy much of the island. Now, he sort of went overboard a bit because he was also talking about how supposedly terrorists had nuclear suitcase bombs. I can't believe this broadcast hasn't been shut down by Echelon yet. Or that suddenly, banned by the National Security
Don't say that. Okay, right? Yes. Go ahead.
That he had that there were terrorists with nuclear suitcase bombs on the San Andreas Fault in California that were going to explode them, and he gave a rather apocalyptic series of scenarios. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Okay, so that's Mr. Fulford talking about that. Was I corrected pretty much the details?
Yes, except, well, okay, but there have been a lot of extenuating circumstances since then and so on. So, but in essence, it is kind of played out in a way. I mean, go ahead. I mean, there's so much to this that I'd like to just get your take, because I've been putting ours take out there for quite some time.
Okay, so when the quake happened, and it's interesting from a number of different aspects as far as the timing of it goes. I was on a cruise to Mexico, and we had there was about 300 people on this cruise. It was fabulously successful. I was volunteering my time to speak on the cruise, but we had Dr. Susan Shumsky, we had Patricia Cota Robles, Daniel Brinkley, Richard Hoagland, Jim Mars. I mean, these fantastic luminaries in the whole New Age community. And a person that's one of my personal heroes is Dr. Carl Johann Kalaman. And Dr. Kalaman, I began reading his books. His first book was called The Mayan Calendar. The second book, which I think was one of the best books and continues to be one of the best books ever written on the subject, is called The Mayan Calendar and the Transformation of Consciousness. And his latest book is called The Purposeful Universe. And one of the reasons why we put the cruise together was because Carl, in his analysis of the Mayan calendar, was talking about how March 9th was going to be the beginning of the 9th wave. Now, he has a bit of a controversial view of this because he believes that the Mayan calendar ends on October 28th of this year, of 2011. And here's the interesting debate of all this, is that if you look at John Major Jenkins, if you look at Jose Arguelles, if you look at all of them, and if you actually look at the alignments of the monuments in Chichen Itza, it points to the end date of the calendar as being actually, or a key date for this, the end date of the calendar actually being December 21st, 22nd, 23rd of 2012, which is the more famous date because that's when the sun goes to 27 degrees Sagittarius and directly aligns with the black hole or the great womb or the cosmic rift at the center of the galaxy. But I think they're both right. I think what he sees on October 28th is the conception of something new, of something amazing. It's like, when does life begin? Does it begin when the sperm hits the egg, or does it begin when the child is actually physically born? I think this is when the sperm hits the egg on October 28th. It begins this whole next level of what's going to happen. What he predicted was that at the beginning of the 9th wave, that this 9th wave, and let's just say it's between now and December 21st of 2012, is the culmination point of 16.4 billion years of human evolution. And he said on March 9th, when the wave actually kicked into gear, that there would be global chaos and panic and great natural disasters and all of these things were going to occur. Well, the quakes actually began with the original Honshu quake, because it started at as a 4.6, and then it was like a 6.4, and then the 9 hit. So literally these quakes that began building into the larger quake, all occurring on the 11/11, the 3/11 date. Once again, Kalaman was talking about it a couple of days before, saying that this is the chaos that was going to occur. And we actually made CNN, because we're on this cruise ship, and they were saying that the Norwegian Star and the Disney Wonder were the two ships at sea, and everybody was all very worried about us. And, I'm like, well, we're in the safest place, because if a tsunami happens, the boat just goes up and goes down. So we're in the best place to be there. Now, this is where it gets a little weird with what went on with the Japanese quake. They have one of the best early warning systems in the world. And there was no warning for this quake whatsoever. They have sonics. They have hydrophonic microphones actually underground. You have the sound of the earthquake that actually was transmitted all over the internet. And yet no real warning of this particular quake. And here's the interesting part about this. If you listen to if you actually break it down, the actual sound of the quake that's on the net, you can find it on YouTube and all over else. If you break it down into various parts, you will actually hear, or you can actually see it, there are spikes that are actually running through the sonics of it that is what's called a woodpecker frequency. And this woodpecker frequency is a repeating staccato machine gun-like sound that occurs when HARP, not only HARP, but the ionospheric Tesla array in Siberia, and also ISCAT, which is the Scandinavian version of HARP, also called the Scattered Incoherent Array, which is a whole baffle of these things all over Norway and Norway, Sweden, Scandinavia, Finland, all across that part of the world. So this woodpecker frequency begins to pound. They crank HARP like to 11 just as these things begin. And it's interesting because the only intelligence that we have on HARP is what are called the magnetometers. And if you lay the wave of the magnetometer out and you lay the wave of the earthquakes out, the magnetometer readings of HARP are exactly the same. I mean, they lay right on top of the actual wave of the quake itself. So it looked to me, assuming this, that the Japanese earthquake was artificially induced. And the psychic and spiritual aspect of it is Japan represents the third eye of the planet. It represents the pineal and pituitary gland. It's the sixth chakra of the earth. And that's the first interesting thing, that now you have a rip in the Earth's crust that's about 172 miles long, 26 miles wide. You have the island of Japan actually moving about 13 feet closer to the United States. You have the edge of Japan sinking by about 20 feet. You have this wave that actually increases the spin of the planet by, I think, about 5 milliseconds or so, and the quake actually altered the axis of the Earth by 6.5 inches. Now, this means that we've now had two quakes in the last couple of years. We've had the 8.8 earthquake in Chile, and now we've had the 9.0 earthquake in Japan. That between the two of these quakes, they've had the effect of actually speeding up the rotation of the Earth, which is going to be very important when I talk about it in a second. If you then look at how the Earth, the landmass of the planet, and you divide it into three key points, like as if there's like a triangle or like a tetrahedron inside the sphere of the Earth, and you draw a 360-degree line around the circle of the Earth. You with me on this?
Absolutely.
Okay. Start the point, and you can go on a map and get your rulers out if you want, or go on Google Earth, and you guys can play along if you want. If you actually start at the Great Pyramid of Giza in Cairo, the Great Pyramid of Giza is built on a 25-acre, perfectly square level. And the pyramid itself is actually built in such a way where the bottom of the pyramid is actually slightly curved, because the Egyptians or whoever built the pyramid knew the exact circumference and the exact shape and size of the planet. The Great Pyramid of Giza sits dead center of all the landmass on Earth. It also sits directly on top of a gigantic, and it goes down 25 miles or so, but a huge granite plate, which means that if you sounded or put a sonic device inside the Great Pyramid, you could actually ring the Earth like a bell. Now, if you go from that point and you go in a straight line exactly 120 degrees, which is a third of 360, 120 degrees due west, you come out right on top of the Deepwater Horizon, which was the oil rig that blew right on top of a gigantic bubble, if you will, a huge asphalt volcano that they then drilled down almost 50,000 feet. They only had permits to drill down 16,000, but they drilled down about 50,000 feet. Then the whole thing explodes. Everybody knew that this was going to happen. They let it run for month after month after month after month. Interesting? Okay, now you take the exact same point from the Great Pyramid again, and you go 120 degrees due east, and you come out directly off the coast of Japan, actually about 100 miles or so off the coast of Osaka, but you come out right at the edge of where this entire fissure opens. So if you put pressure on that, it would actually pop up as to where it actually did pop up in Honshu. So all three of these points interacting now, and it's interesting that you have the riots and the regeneration and the government toppling in Egypt. You have the Deepwater Horizon, where that oil is allowed to spew month after month after month, and now you have a 9.0 earthquake in Japan both of these events are altering the rotational frequency of the Earth. You're bleeding liquid out of one, almost as if you're puncturing a blister or a bubble on a basketball. You're actually ripping the Earth's crust in another one, actually moving the tectonic frequency of Japan at the same time and speeding up the rotational frequency of the Earth. Now, if you combine all these things together into a grander conspiracy, if you will, and you take all of this with all of the things that the super elite are worried about, and the biggest things they're worried about in 2012, outside of human consciousness shifting, is they're terrified that the sun is going to go into a gigantic cycle called Cycle 24, and that Cycle 24 is going to be the worst cycle that we've seen since a solar flare wiped out most of the life on this planet 14,500 years ago. That's number one. Right. Number two, magnetic north and true north since 1945 have been moving towards each other. So you have true north up here at, I don't know, where Santa Claus's house is, and then you have magnetic north here. So we start testing a bunch of atomic bombs, right? We start dropping 1,700 bombs on our biggest enemy, which is apparently Las Vegas, because we drop all these bombs on Nevada. And then you have thousands tested by the Russians. We knock the Earth slightly off kilter. We literally knock the planet off its axis. And now magnetic north and true north are now moving towards each other. And they've been going towards each other at a pretty steady clip of about 40 years or so, or about 40 miles each year. And that as it's got closer to it, it's starting to speed up. Suddenly, in 2009, once again, our buddy Barack Obama goes to Oslo, Norway. And in Oslo, Norway, he accepts the Nobel Peace Prize. Well, I say, God bless him, and thank God Barack Obama accepted the Nobel Peace Prize. Because, let me see, we're at war in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, we've just attacked Pakistan. Can you imagine how many wars we'd be in if he didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize? So thank God he won it. Otherwise, we'd be done. The apocalypse would already have happened. So thank God for Barack Obama that he accepted that Nobel Peace Prize. But while he was there, on December 9th, there was this weird spiral that appeared in the sky. And all these world leaders watched this spiral in the sky. And I can tell you for a fact that IceCat, which is the Norwegian, or should I say the Scandinavian version of HARP, was cranked to 11 at that period of time with all of these various sort of death rays pointing towards this point in space, creating, for all intents and purposes, a zero-point energy vortex, a black hole between here and the sun. That's what that spiral actually was, to bleed energy off the sun, to stop that from happening. But at the same time, you have this weird gray tetrahedron, this huge UFO floating around Red Square, and there's a big report on the net that I can't believe what didn't make all the local news, but that the magnetic pole somehow became unhinged from the center of the planet, and now instead of magnetic north moving towards true north, after 2009, apparently it listened to a little bit too much Fox News and like way too much Glenn Beck, because the planetary pole took a hard right turn and is now heading towards Siberia. And since then, it's moved close to 200 miles due east. And I was the only one that was jumping up and down telling people that not only is this significant, but now you're going to see massive weather systems on the East Coast, the snowpocalypse, snowmageddon, because now the Siberian Express that usually comes over and dumps down into the center part of the country is now moving east, which means that you're going to see all this crazy stuff start happening on the East Coast. So if you look at the bigger picture of this, and once again, if we go back to Japan, that if you look at the evidence that, and here's the interesting things about the Japanese earthquake, and we'll talk about Fukushima a little bit as well. But the interesting things about the Japanese earthquake is that, number one, Japan has it's some huge amount. It's not $1 trillion, but it's probably about $700 billion in unfunded pension plans as retirement for most of their older people, where the money has pretty much disappeared. It's pretty much like our Social Security, but the Japanese had a system that was set up by MacArthur after the war, where 6% of everything they make goes into the banks, which then allows them to literally retire with like $1 million when they turn 60 or so. Well, guess what? All that money's gone. And so it's interesting that now, after the earthquake, they don't really have to explain, number one, where that money went. Number two, the earthquake in Japan probably benefits the Russians the most, because the Russians are now currently the #1 producer of oil on the planet, and they're pumping out about approximately 9.8 million barrels per day. The Saudis are pumping out about I think about 9.4 or 9.2. Canada's pumping out about 8.8. United States is fourth, I think, at about either 8 or 7.8 or so. And then you get down to Venezuela and whatever else. Once again, thank goodness for Obama, because apparently we're going to have Brazil's oil to use pretty soon. Heaven forbid we should develop ours. But the but the challenge here is that now that there's 55 nuclear plants in Japan, the economic effect that the quake had on the United States was we had spent about $8 billion on development, on plans, on permits for brand new state-of-the-art, what they call atomic pebbles, if you will, but brand new state-of-the-art nuclear reactors that were going to be Obama's self-sufficiency plan, which were all based on the French model, where they've had fantastic success with nuclear reactors for about the last 30 years. Well, all that went right in the trash can. So $8 billion just went piffed, because no nuclear reactors, nobody's going to have them, nobody wants them in their neighborhood. So that's the end of the nuclear program for the United States, which of course is great for the oil companies and our buddies at British Petroleum. Part two of this is that Fukushima, which was built originally by General Electric, and is the oldest one of the plants, and is built on a fault line, and is built on the coast, and is the one where they said, please God, don't build this, the big I told you so plan, is melting down worse than anything we've ever seen. I mean, to give you an idea that the disaster scale for atomic plants goes to 7. Well, that's as far as it goes, and it's been beyond 7. It's up to, I can't even tell you how far it is, because they don't even rate the disaster that this thing is behind. Since the quake has occurred, and I don't know why they're covering this up in the Japanese press and the world press, the only people that are reporting on it are the Mexicans. And this is Jaime Maussan down in Mexico, is these gigantic, massive waves of UFOs over Japan, specifically these huge tubes that have been seen actually over the reactor. There was an explosion at the reactor that they had film footage of what literally looked like a UFO diving into the explosion. Now there's a rumor, this is just a rumor which I can't verify, but that supposedly the last big sighting of UFOs over Fukushima actually had the effect of reducing the radiation levels, and that now apparently they're doing something to help. Whoever it is, or whatever it is actually doing something to help actually reduce the radiation levels there. But they were trying to play this off like it was okay, and I got information about it once again from some guys at the Nuclear Regulatory Agency who said, look, they've given up. They were flying in experts. And the same week that the LA Times and the Obama administration was saying that it's all fine, it's all under control, and the only radio show that would let me on was Rick Barber late night on KOA, because he's the only one with the guts enough to actually have the truth on late at night, which tells you a lot about other late night radio hosts. But the idea was that I got this information out there, and the minute I broke this, there was just all hell to pay, because then the White House went crazy. Not like they were paying attention to me, but something happened where they went nuts and said, how did this get into the public forum about how bad the actual quake was, or how bad the Fukushima reactor was there in Japan. Again, the effect of this seems to be, and I really put myself out on a limb here with this, because it's so popular, Carrie, for the pundits to light their hair on fire and jump up on a roof and scream and yell about how the New World Order and the Illuminati and the George Soroses and the Rothschilds and the Rockefeller, Bush, Clinton crime syndicate, are all trying to murder us all, and trying to destroy the world, or trying to tip over the planet, or trying to reduce the population to 500 million or so. And yet, I've seen no evidence of this. What I see is super technology being used in such a way that it's fixing the problems. It's the same thing that when I started jumping up and down about Y2K, and I started talking about it as early as I think 94, 95, 96, they spent almost $600 billion fixing the problem behind the scenes, because there was a real panic that something was going to go on, but they fixed it. And now what I'm seeing is that the three worries are either a magnetic shift of the poles, a physical shift of the poles, or massive solar activity in the 2013 to 2014 timeframe. By the way, all predicted in the Great Pyramid of Giza. The Great Pyramid of Giza has what's called the River of Fire between 2012 and 2014, late 2012 and into late 2014. Not a good day. The pyramid predicts that we think we get past it, that there's going to be a big sigh of relief that after 2012, everybody's going to go. And the pyramid predicts this is what I've been saying from the beginning. You walk around the pit in the floor, you don't fall into the pit, you think you're fine, and all of us 2012 people are all going to be mocked. We're all going to be like, oh, you said the world was going to end, and I saw that movie 2012, and you know, the only thing I learned from that movie is you can escape the apocalypse if you have a limousine and a Winnebago, apparently. and so everybody's going to relax. But all the disasters, 2012 is just the beginning point. It's going to be the cosmic trigger for whatever it is that's coming down the pipe. And what I'm seeing is that I've seen the Chile earthquake and the Japan earthquake. I think that the Japanese earthquake has actually, number one, saved California from a catastrophic event possibly on the San Andreas, number one. Number two, I think that the rotation of the planet was actually slowing and the magnetic field of the Earth was actually beginning to collapse. And now you've had two major events that have actually sped up the rotation of the planet. Number three, December 21st of 2012, everybody, Terrence McKenna was talking about this, and I found an old sightings interview that we did with him like way back in the day, back in like 92, 93 or so, where Terrence was talking about this. And I think there was a couple of points, just to give some honor to Terrence, that he was talking about with the Time Wave Zero software about what's coming and some very interesting dates. Terrence talked about these novelty waves, and we're right in the middle of this amazing novelty wave right now with the marriage of William and Kate. 3 billion people watch that, and then the Obama birth certificate, and then him.
Yeah, well, they're getting married on Hitler's own fucking marriage date.
Okay, yeah. When Eva Braun and
This is,
together, yeah.
you understand that there is heavy, you know, Illuminati symbolism going on here. I mean, it's craziness. I don't agree with you with your conclusion. They are trying to eliminate 2/3 of the population. We have huge amount of data to that degree. In fact, their scenario is progressing, and they're moving along quite well. I appreciate what you're saying though about the polarities between the incident in the Gulf, which I've been told is actually a Stargate there, a very major Stargate, and for some reason they used a nuclear bomb there. There may be an ET base under there as well that they're trying to mess with. But yes, there was a volcano as well. And then you're talking about Japan being the other side of the polarity, and that creating a speeding up of the rotation of the Earth. That is very interesting. Now, where that all leads, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure what you're saying about California. Can you like drill down a little more on why you think that the earthquake in Japan saved California? How does that work?
Because everything that I've seen them using this technology, and again, to point out, the only place that I've seen them, I mean, if you look at a mass extinction event, if you're looking at them killing millions of people, the only place where it's actually happened, I mean, can you tell me the only place where it's actually happened, where they've actually killed millions of people?
Africa.
Yep. And why Africa? Why would you think that they would want to
They're
wipe
starving
out
everybody. Well, because they want, that's actually going to be one of the places they want to keep, you know, for their Garden of Eden.
Okay, but why wipe out the indigenous population of Africa?
Because they want it for themselves.
Okay, good. And if you want to think 50 years ahead, if you want to think like they think, and you have a period of global warming, which is then followed by a massive period of global cooling and possibly a glaciation of the planet, that if you also look at the Deepwater Horizon and the oil spill as slowing or possibly stopping what's called the Atlantic Conveyor. This is what the movie Day After Tomorrow was all about. You stop the Atlantic Conveyor, and basically Europe freezes to death.
Right.
That's not going to happen. The Europeans are not going to sit there and freeze to death. What they're going to do is they would actually need to move a mass population where? To the south, down into Africa. but there's people there. So what do? You wipe out the indigenous population of Africa. They've also found that, and once again, this is their thinking from the Project for an American 21st Century,
Right.
is that they find that a combination between Asians and Caucasians make far better slaves. Apparently, the blacks just haven't cooperated with slavery over the numerous events to enslave them over the past couple of thousand years. They just they haven't been able to really do it. And so they find that, okay, well, if they're not going to work for us, then we're just going to wipe them out. But that was one of the few programs that I found. Every time I've heard a panic, and I've been listening to this for 30 plus years, and they talk about, that SARS is going to wipe everybody out, and we should have had a global flu plague or virus or something in 1998. Spanish influenza was going to wipe us out. And again, it just over and over and over again, I hear it and it doesn't happen. And yet I see the technology being used specifically to stabilize the pole, to actually stop the magnetic and polar shift from happening now that the North Pole is moving. And this is now scientific fact. This is what I've been saying from the get-go. It's now moving east, which means that it's not moving north, which means that the possible planetary flip phenomenon is not going to occur. I don't know anything
But are
about
you
nuclear
sure of
bombs
that? I
being
mean,
used.
okay, I appreciate that. I wonder if that's true, though. In other words,
Yes, sure of it. We are sure of it. Check it. There's newspaper articles on this. They just ran an article in the Tampa Tribune about how they're having to now completely realign all of the
yes, I heard that news.
jet runways at the airports, because now the pole has moved east by 200 miles. Just check it out, please. It's all.
And so you think that okay, but you think that means we're not going to have a pole shift?
Correct.
Okay, where do you
Everything
stand? I appreciate
Yes.
that. Okay, where do you stand on Planet X, Sean?
I've been debating Mark Hazelwood on this from the get-go. Back when they were talking about it in 2003, and they said it was supposed to tip over the world in March of 2003. Remember that?
Right.
Remember when they were saying the
well,
world was going to
okay.
get destroyed in 2003, and I was the only one that stood up at the World UFO Congress and said, look, I love conspiracy theories as much as the next guy, but you have no evidence for what it is you're saying. Absolutely none. The photograph that they were running of what they claimed was Planet X was Io, and they were being mocked by astronomers for running fake information.
Okay,
And again,
okay. But it's actually, look, are you familiar with the work of Andy Lloyd? Because there is a dark star, which is a brown dwarf, and that is moving into our solar system.
But Carrie, that's different from a Planet X from Nibiru. That is a planet coming towards us. If you're talking about Nemesis, or what's also known as Nemesis and Tyche, I think, is the other one, which is the sister of Nemesis, I think it is. There is the possibility, and NASA says it's there, and then it's not, and it's there, and then it's not. Yes, there is the possibility of Nemesis, of a brown dwarf star that is a twin of the sun.
Yes.
That's about 460 to 500 astronomical units out. But again, that is completely different from what they talk about as far as Nibiru or Maldek. And again,
right.
I know Zacharias really well. I asked him, I was with Pete Carroll, my buddy, the head coach of the SC Trojans, at the New Life Expo, or the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles. And we sat down and we had dinner with Zachariah, and I'd known him for many years. And Zachariah, again, is saying, I feel like I've created this panic with the whole Planet X thing, because we don't know where the decimal point is in the Sumerian cuneiform, and it could be 3,600, 36,000, or 36 million. But he said specifically that if Planet X is coming towards us, that it's not going, in his best guesstimation, that it would not come around until somewhere. He talked about like the 29th century or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I know. I saw him at the New Life Expo or whatever they call that. So yeah, absolutely. And he said it was like 75. He spoke there before he passed.
And I also point out that astronomy is the most populist science there is. A 14-year-old kid discovered Comet Hyakutake. Hale and Bopp were not really professional astronomers who discovered the Hale-Bopp comet. Everybody's got a telescope to be able to look up at certain parts of the sky and see things coming. And this isn't even a good conspiracy. I mean, I'm all for
okay, but we're not talking. I'm not. Planet X is just a slang for what I was referring to. What I was trying to get at was really the dark star.
Okay,
So
let me hold on 1 second then. Let me explain that then. What you're talking about then is that at the same time the sun aligns with 27 degrees Sagittarius with the center of the galaxy on December 21st of 2012, okay, that as the Earth is moving around the sun, that there's another alignment, sort of a kill shot, if you will, that not only does the planet align first as the sun aligns with the center of the galaxy, but as the Earth moves around the sun, there'll be another alignment of the sun, if you will, with Nemesis, now mind you, with the center of the galaxy that many people believe will create a gigantic or massive graviton pulse or solar flare or kill shot. And the Undersecretary of Defense several months ago made a statement to a group of astrophysicists saying that February of 2013 is what we have to worry about, and that
yes,
February of 2013 there may be a massive solar flare or some kind of pulse which could destroy life on Earth as we know it. And these astrophysicists were all up in arms saying, well, how do you know this? And he simply said, I know what I know, and he stormed out of the meeting. So yes, again, whatever the Great Pyramid predicts as being what they call the River of Fire happens between 2012, late 2012, so let's call it 2014, through, let's call it 2016 or so, which is going to be a very bad day. But the 13th planet or the 12th planet, as Michio calls it, the 10th planet or the 12th planet, or whatever planet it is, this thing that's actually swinging close to us, and there's beings on it that live in gold or something or whatever. I mean, Sitchin showed the calendars of this planet actually coming around, but again, he talks about it not coming till the 29th century. The Billy
okay,
Meyer case,
but that's not actually. I mean, what happens is if there is such a planet, is actually rotating around the brown dwarf.
Okay,
Okay.
I got you.
Okay, so
But
it's a different scenario, but you'd have to look into the work. And I have an interview with him, Andy Lloyd. He spent 10 years writing a book called Dark Star, and I encourage
okay,
you to read it. He's also lives and has contacts with the GCHQ, and has suddenly went from spending 10 years writing a nonfiction book about the brown dwarf in which he proves the existence, and then pretty soon in the British press you start seeing articles about this coming up that validates what he was talking about. But on top of that, he turns from that to writing fiction. And you know what he's writing his fiction books about? The Anunnaki. Okay, and the return of the Anunnaki.
Terry, we're in a complete agreement. We're in
Okay.
agreement where I'm saying that research is valid.
Yeah, I hear you.
Guys that I was talking about are the people at Zeta talk. And
Yeah, well,
Marquez,
please.
once again, got nothing against these guys, but they were writing a book at that time when I debated them that was basically saying that March, April, May of 2003 we're all going to die.
Yeah, I know. I know all of that nonsense. Look,
Yeah.
that's not our concern here. Okay, so let's move on from there to what we're looking at now. There's also this other thing that's happening right now where they're talking a lot about this Elenin, and I'm not sure what some people are calling that an asteroid. You know anything about that?
No.
Okay. It's just recent stuff that's been in the news about this and somebody's making a massive prediction that sounds full of disinfo. It's saying something's going to happen in the fall of this year. And it's coming out through NASA, which is never a straight answer anyway. So, there you go.
Now the only comment that I have on that is that when we were doing in 2003, I'd written 2 documentaries. The first one was Prophecy of the Pyramids, which we shot and we filmed. And part 2 of that, or the second episode, was supposed to be something called Timelines of the Bible Code. And the Bible Code has been it's been accurate and inaccurate. It's predicted a number of rather spectacular things and then been completely, utterly wrong or misinterpreted in other things. But when we spoke to people like Harold Gans, who was a cryptologist at the Pentagon, when we spoke to people like Eliyahu Rips, who is the guy who discovered using the Bible Code through a computer at Jerusalem University or Hebrew University in Jerusalem, all of them seemed to believe that there was an asteroid on its way to this planet, according to the Bible Code, that was going to hit the planet in approximately 2010, which did not occur. The one Bible code that I've been tracking for a long time, and again, the Bible codes that I pay attention to were Bible codes on an economic collapse, where we have a Bible code that says that there would be that talks about an economic collapse in the United States in October of 1929, and at the beginning of another economic collapse in 2006, 2007, 2008. So when you have Bible codes that give past predictions of dates that have been accurate, you have a tendency to look towards the future. The one code that I've been the most worried about, that I've been showing people in all my talks and all my lectures, has been a Bible code about the New Madrid Fault, which we ran, again, back in 2002. And it basically says that the American New Madrid Fault earthquake, eruption of the fault, and it gives the year 1811. And the New Madrid Fault did blow on December 16th of 1811, and then ruptured again, swallowing and completely destroying the town of New Madrid, Missouri, of about 400 souls or so in February of 1812. Now, we are now coming up on the bicentennial of these particular massive earthquakes, which rang bells as far north as Montreal, which made the Mississippi River run backwards, which if there had been the kind of civilization we have there now, would be completely and utterly devastating. Now, this Bible code is now saying that the prospect for earthquakes, and it says prospect of earthquake 1811, and then it gives the dates of 2010 and 2011 as being the next rupturing of the New Madrid Fault. Now, interestingly enough, in 2010, there has been a lot of activity and a lot of activation of the fault line. That's the first interesting thing. The second thing is that all of these freak tornadoes and these freak storms and these things that literally have been dropping down and being 2 miles wide and moving through town after town and moving through state after state, every single one of these anomalous tornadoes that you're seeing just so happens to be approximately right on top of the New Madrid Fault. And if you actually lay the kill zone of the New Madrid Fault down with the concentration of the highest concentration of storms that we've seen in American history over the course of the past couple of weeks, you then combine this with a gigantic FEMA exercise that began in March of this year, where FEMA is now saying we're doing the largest earthquake exercise ever as a warning, if you will, for the bicentennial of the New Madrid Fault line.
Just like they were doing an exercise during 9/11.
I'm really worried about the New Madrid Fault. And if the Bible code is correct, then that means that we're looking at a rupture of the New Madrid Fault by October, because that would be the end of the Hebrew year. I'm not sure when the Feast of the Trumpets is this year, but Rosh Hashanah is usually late September, first part of October, and the Bible code goes from October to October approximately, because it's obviously on a lunar calendar. So that would mean a rupturing of the fault by this year. One other thing that is interesting as well, and this is getting back to Terence McKenna's Time Wave Zero software, if you look at Terence McKenna's research on the Time Wave Zero is based on the I Ching. He took the I Ching from when the I Ching started under King Wen, that's W-E-N, King Wen, and then he noticed that the 64 hexagrams over a course of a 60-year cycle actually unraveled in a Fibonacci wave or curve, then beginning again at the center with another Fibonacci wave or curve. And he noticed that when he started them at King Wen, I'm not exactly sure, it was like 5,238 BC or something like that, when the I Ching begins and unravels them all the way out to the end of time, he was coming to December 21st of 2012. If you then look at a number of mathematicians who've worked with the Time Wave Zero software, what's called the Kelly graph, what's called the Chiliac graph, what's called the Huang Tai graph, all of these different mathematicians who have been looking at this novelty wave or curve. And again, we're right dead center in the middle of the top of the novelty wave right now, which then begins to go all the way down towards the end of the year. Then you take all of that information and you compare it with Cliff High, with his web bots and his web spies, if you will, looking for, and again, I've been trying to get a hold of Cliff back, and we've been trying to go back and forth, because again, if you and I are having a conversation about this, and this conversation is going out to the millions of people who listen to your show around the world, and our conversation becomes a conversation amongst those people, our conversation then becomes perception, and that perception then becomes reality. And this is kind of what the web bots then pick up, is that when you have super creative people like yourself that are talking about things that are of a concern to them, then we as prophets, if you will, get other people interested and other people kind of concerned about this, which then becomes the whole perception of reality. Well, if you look at Cliff High's web bots, the web bots, the Chiliac graph, the Kelly graph, the Hung-Tae graph, everything, all of these things all peak at what they call a tipping point approximately November 10th, 11th, and 12th of this year. So let me just combine everything together. You have Dr. Carl Kalaman, who says that the ninth wave of the calendar, the end of the calendar, the hyperactivation of human evolution, 16.4 billion years, if you will, begins on March 9th and ends on October 28th of 2012. Well, literally about 2 weeks later, you have November 11th and 12th, which is now the tipping point of all of these scientists, if you will, and the tipping point of the WebBot graph. And then take Terence McKenna into it. Let's give Terence some props, because Terence, one of the things that I think is completely missed on this, Terence was saying that the very last wave, the last Fibonacci curve, would be 385 days back in time from December 21st of 2012. And I'm thinking, okay, why 385 days? And I was looking, because I looked at this, and it was just a brief thing that I was seeing on this, and I'm like, why 385 days? And then it hit me. 385 days is exactly a 13-month lunar cycle. So that's a lunar year. 13 months is 385 days. 385 days back from December 21st of 2012 is December 2nd. So if you're looking at October 28th, November 10th, 11th, and 12th, and December 2nd, within that 45-plus day period. And then Terence said that after this final 385 days unravels, you then come to a novelty wave that drops off the chart into infinity, in which every other novelty wave, which includes the fall of the Roman Empire, the discovery of the fall of the Roman Empire, the Muslim Golden Age between about the 9th and the 12th centuries or so, the Black Plague, the discovery of the New World, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, World War I, World War II, that all of these are novelty waves or spikes. Whatever happens on December 21st of 2012 is greater than the sum of all of those combined. And my question to him was, Terence, what could it be? And Terence said the only thing that I can think of is that it ends duality, it ends the separation between men and women, if you will. It ends, and where that separation really begins is I guess you could say the garden, if you will, because it's the separation of the left and right hand sides of the brain, which for all intents and purposes is the separation of the logical didactic with the quantum time emotional intuitive. So those come back together. And in essence, what you're looking at is what I call the redemption of Eve. That Eve in the garden listens to the snake and bites the apple and then gets Adam to bite it. And then God comes along and says, who bit the apple? Did you eat that apple, Adam? And he goes, the first thing out of his mouth is, nope, her fault. She did it. Of course, typical guy blames the girl for everything. So nope, her fault. She's the one that did it. And here's what's interesting. Up until the 10th century, there's a verse where God says when he lays the curse on Adam and Eve, and he talks to the snake, and he says to the serpent, I shall put enmity between her seed and thy seed, and she shall crush his head. This is where it gets weird. The head of the snake. She's going to crush his head, the head of the snake. But he, the snake, shall bruise her heel, is how it originally reads. The 10th century, they changed that because they don't want you to know that there's the possibility of a female messianic figure coming in the future. And in the 10th century, they change it from, and she shall crush his head, and he shall bruise his heel, which fundamentalists will tell you, oh, well, that's the promise of Jesus and the promise of the Messiah, because they couldn't have the woman who reappears, by the way, in the book of Revelation as the woman who gives birth to the mighty man with the red dragon snapping at her heels, but she becomes the lady of the seven stars, which is all the symbolism of the Pleiades and whatever else, but it talks about this new generation of kids being born, all these amazing things happening, but it literally cuts into a better effect, the understanding that there is a feminine aspect of Quetzalcoatl coming, the female establishment of the blue magnetic feminine DNA helix or ray, if you will, a realigning of the right and left-hand sides of the brain, because Terence said it has to be the end of duality, Because with the end of duality, you don't see good and bad. You see positives and negatives. You see nights and days. You don't see anything as inherently evil, if you will, but things as being what they are. And that after 2012, his exact words were, I think the only thing that could happen that could create a novelty wave as huge as this is predicting is the possible invention of time travel. Because if we can travel through time, it completely destroys our understanding of the linear nature of the universe.
Well, but that's already been invented and done.
Sure.
So that's the trouble.
And if you want to know how it's done, my book, Sands of Time, if you want to get it, it's on the website, Sands of Time. It's
okay.
has the equation, it shows you the development of it, it shows you what they're doing with it now, and our next book is going to be about how they did travel back in the past and do a lot of kind of interesting things.
Okay, well, thank you for that, because I appreciate that you have firsthand knowledge of some of Terence McKenna's thoughts in this regard, because he was a really amazing soul, and you know, it's wonderful that you can relate some of his thoughts on these very sort of weighty matters. Okay, well, at this point, thank you. That's a great summary of what you see and what you understand in terms of what may be coming in the near future. Then to get back to the New Madrid Fault, because we have evidence, we have information. Let's put it that way. That indeed it is going to be the next thing that goes, and I personally have been warning certain people about that myself. It seems to be pointing in that direction. What I have been told by whistleblowers is that the situation in the Gulf, that there was actually a nuclear bomb that went off in the Gulf and caused most of what happened there, and that it has stimulated sort of a vulnerability that will eventually cause the New Madrid Fault to go, and that's part of the plan. So
can't speak to that. I haven't seen. I've seen.
Yeah, well, this is whistleblower testimony, and so all I'm saying is that it does seem to parallel what you're hearing in regard to the Bible code, which, you know, I read at least I think it was Michael Drosnin's books on that.
BP only, British Petroleum only had licenses to drill 16,000 feet, and they drilled close to. On the books, they drilled 38,000 feet. Again, why? They were actually tapping oil, and they were all just fat and happy at 16,000 feet. Why the hell would they drill down further then? And and if you want, the whistleblower information was supposedly they went down 50,000 feet or so. But the theory is that what they were trying to do is tap into a source of abiotic oil, exactly like the Russians did in '96 and '97. That if you drill down deep enough into the earth, and this all came from a paper by a German scientist in the 1930s, that if you get down beyond the fossil fuels and you go down, beyond, bedrock and flintstones and, Barney and Wilma and Pebbles and Bam Bam and the Fruity Pebbles part of it, and actually get back down into the actual strata of the earth, that abiotic oil actually renews itself. And that's why you see it just spewing out of that hole. I mean, what they tapped into was in essence, a gigantic asphalt volcano, and the bleed of it just running month after month, even though they knew how to fix it. I mean, James Cameron appeared in front of Congress, the director, and said, this is how you fix it. You have the technology. You know how to do it. Why aren't you doing it? So that was the big mystery. The big mystery is that they knew it was going to go.
Exactly.
The head of BP sells his stock. Halliburton does all kinds of stuff.
Right.
I think the greater aspect of this might be is that then Halliburton and Donald Trump then buys up all this land around Louisiana. There is a FEMA thing in place for like $40 billion to start moving people out of there. But, again, they drilled far deeper than they were supposed to. They knew that something was going to happen. Once it did happen, they just let it go for month after month for what apparently seemed no reason.
Okay, but yeah, I appreciate that. Now, we are actually very close to 2 hours, almost over 2 hours into this. We've got about 5-10 minutes, but I did want to let people ask you some questions, Sean. And this has been fabulous. You've done a fabulous job.
Thanks.
And so what I'm trying to do at this moment is basically see if anyone can has any specific questions that they've been trying to ask me. So I'm looking into the chat rooms as we speak here and seeing if there's anything that really sticks out that someone wanted. I know someone wanted you to talk about silver, and we haven't
Yeah.
actually gone into the economic situation in in the United States. I'd like you to talk also about whether you know anything about the white hats who have been doing these, talking about the global settlements, and whether you're familiar with their website, etc.
I am.
The Wanta money that goes into the global settlements. You know that story.
Right. Well, I did a huge article on Leo Wanta back in the '90s. When all this is going on, again, tracking this stuff for as long as I have, Carrie. I'd love to say that, oh yeah, it's all great, somebody's going to save us, and it just, it never happens. And yes, I know everything about Leo Wanta and the collapse of the Soviet Union.
How do you feel about the dollar? Do you think that it will collapse sooner rather than later? Some people are saying July.
Well, they're wrong, and I'm right, and the dollar's actually starting to get stronger now. As far as silver goes, I've been the great prophet on both silver and gold, and it's probably one of my legacies of telling people way back in the day. And I get a little tired of people saying, "Oh, you're just crazy and you don't know what you're talking about." Back when silver was $3, and I was telling people that it was going to go to 25 and then go to 30. And that's where it's at now. And even when it was up at 9, I was saying, look, you guys need to just pour every dollar you've got into silver. All throughout this, when gold was back at 300, 325, and I was telling people that it was going to go to 600, then it was going to go to 900, then it was going to go to 1,000, then it was going to break 1,000 and go to 1,200 or so. What I see silver doing now is I see silver going to about $64. And I've been saying this for a while, that I think is going to be the peak at silver. But I don't think, and again, I think people that are telling you it's going to go further beyond that are trying to sell you something, and I'm not trying to sell you anything. If you want to buy a book off my website, that'd be great. I don't even have the newsletter anymore. Unfortunately, I wish I did, but we went broke with everything else that was going on, and that was one of the things that was, that was one of the casualties of all the horrible stuff that's occurred recently. But I also think that it is interesting because silver is. There's only about $20 billion worth of silver on Earth. Warren Buffett and Bill Gates own about half of it. And I do think that if we hit 65, and my advice to anybody that's got a bunch of silver is you always sell on the way up. If you're looking at silver at about 55 or so, I'd cash out. I'd be happy with the money that you made, and I'd get out of it because silver is starting to look like a bubble. And with oil beginning to start going down, which is one of the things I said, that we would only have oil prices this high for the economy can only stand it for about 3 months or so. Otherwise, you hit like a tipping point, and then they have to bring the price of oil back down because oil fuels everything else. Silver, again, I think is going to start to come back down the other side. And the minute silver starts to go, it's going to be the trial balloon bubble for the collapse of gold. There's a lot of people still trying to sell you gold, telling you gold's going to go to 2,500 and 3,000 or so. I'll give you some advice for nothing. If you want to hedge your bet, there's a really interesting stock out there called DZZ. That's like dog, zebra. And if you buy DZZ, I think it's about $7 a share. But if gold goes down, like I think it's going to, and it plummets as far down as I think it's going to, if you get DZZ at anywhere between $6 to $7.50 a share, then you've got a stock on your hands that'll be worth anywhere between $160 and about $200 in no time. And it's a good hedge because I think they're going to pop the gold bubble here pretty soon. It's smelling, gold particularly is smelling exactly like my predictions about the collapse of the dot-com bubble. It's smelling exactly like my predictions of the collapse of the stock market a couple of years ago. You're going to see the stock market go to 14,000. Again, this has been my prediction over and over again. Back in the day, years ago, I said the stock market would go to 14,500. It went to 14,387, I think, and because I missed it by 100 points, I got a bunch of flack from people because, it didn't go to 14.5, you're an idiot. but it's going to go back to the 14,000 range, 14.5 or so. I know it's just there's so many haters out there. I love everybody and I try to be nice to everybody, and apparently I am the most loved and hated person on the web, and I never talk bad about anyone and never try to say anything bad about anybody. But I think that
So where do you think the dollar is going?
well, that's what's interesting. Again, is that if you look at what the dollar is and what it does, the United States, again, does not play well with others. And instead of our economy collapsing, we go take over, say, Libya, let's say, or we put a puppet regime in Libya to get their oil and get their gold and get their water, which is the most valuable thing in Libya right now. People don't realize that Gaddafi spent $25 billion on the man-made lake project, which was an aqueduct, which is probably 10 times greater than the Mulholland Aqueduct, and one of the greatest engineering feats of the 21st century. Gaddafi last year said, now we really have to be worried about the Americans because they will triple their efforts to topple us, because now they not only have gold, no debt, an amazing banking system and structure, and now they've got water. And Libya is our fallback position for the 21st century. When we get out of Afghanistan and out of Iraq, the United States was always planning on going to Libya. And we just didn't like Gaddafi. So we topple him, we put in a puppet government, and Libya becomes yet another state of the empire. So everybody that talks about the United States collapsing doesn't realize that we have a $15 trillion economy. The only economy greater than ours is all of Europe, which makes about $1 trillion more a year. Our government, the federal government, with its budget of 5 or 6 trillion per year, just our federal government spends more than the entire gross domestic product of Japan, to give you an idea. So that's how huge the United States is. And I think it's interesting, too, that the United States was the #1 manufacturing nation from 1895 until 2010, when we were outstripped by China. But that is now going to change with what's happened with Japan. So when I'm talking about the dollar, what you've seen is my prediction has been correct. The dollar, as I talked about 30% inflation, and that you would see the dollar's value drop by 30%, and that's exactly right. It is now worth 73% of what it was, I think, about a year or so ago. So once again, I'll probably get bagged on again for missing it by 3 points, but it's 27. The inflation rate is now 27%.
Okay, so you think the dollar is going back up? Is that what you're saying?
It's going back up now. That's a fact. It's not collapsing now. And the reason it's not going to collapse anytime really soon is because foreign countries are still willing to buy our debt. And as long as they're willing to buy our debt, and they think that the United States government can repay its debt, and it has proved that it's been able to, because when we can't pay our debt, we beat somebody up. We go and take over a country. And here's the good news about the United States. We are going to get through a very, very bad time between now and about 2025. But the United States of America is going to be the nation of the 21st century. We have a Navy that controls the oceans of the world. We have a $15 to $16 trillion economy. We have more manufacturing here than anybody else in the world. What's going to happen is that there's going to be a reboot of this. This is what I'm really afraid of. What I'm afraid of is that Barack Obama smacking you in the face with his fake birth certificate, smacking you in the face with, Frosty bin Laden, that he pulls out of the freezer and dumps off a boat somewhere, that if there's a major terrorist attack, maybe on the, and my prediction for this had been, by the way, and let me put this on the record, years ago what I saw as the next attack on the United States was a ship or a boat that was actually coming into New York Harbor that then got identified as having some kind of atomic weapon on it. And then there was a Navy SEAL team, and they go in, and there's a big fight, and it looks like Die Hard and Under Siege all combined, and the ship blows with a low-yield nuclear weapon about 50 miles off the coast of New York City, so that it creates an electromagnetic pulse which blacks out the city for a while, creates a big panic, but doesn't really damage anything. But that's what I've seen. That's my vision, and that's what I've remote viewed for this. When do I see this happening? I'm not really sure. It could happen any day. It could never happen. It could be one of those timelines that then alters. But that's what I see as something actually happening next. If the tipping points that we're talking about, let's put all this together now. April 8th and 9th, George Soros spends $50 million to get 200 of his best buddies together in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, and does the Bretton Woods 2 conference. The Bilderbergers are going to be meeting in Switzerland within the next couple of weeks or so, which are going to now talk about the ideas that Soros, because Soros is basically the Rothschild representative, and is considered the voice of reason, if you will, for the Bilderbergers. Soros was the one that was vehemently against the Iraq War. Soros was the one that was vehemently against the Bush family. Soros is the one that started Air America to basically start bagging on Bush because he didn't like the Bush-Clinton-Rockefeller crime syndicate version. The Rockefeller version was, we're going to beat up the world, we're going to kill everybody, we don't care about the sheep, we're going to shear them, we're going to kill them. You know, that's just the way it's going to be. The Rothschild version is, look, it's a kinder, gentler socialism. We're going to build the same prison, but we're going to give you a blanket and a pillow. We're going to give you health care. And if you look at where the Rothschilds have been preeminent, they set up countries like France. They set up countries like Canada. Pretty nice places to live. It's a slave state. It's completely socialist and utterly fascist. But again, you have health care. It's a pretty nice place to live. You got a lot of time off. You get 6 weeks vacation. The Rothschilds are saying,
yeah, I've heard that.
If you put the carrot up, that people will be far more willing to accept the mark of the beast, to accept the health care program, to accept the socialized structure, if you give them some creature comforts or whatever. And that's the conversation that's going on behind the scenes. But what Soros has said is that he said, look, the New World Order ship has sailed, and if you're not on it, you're going to get left behind. And they've got some kind of plan in place that's going to be key to the tipping point of the world that is going to occur at some point between October 28th and let's call it the 1st of 2012, and once again, Terence McKenna's date was December 12th, the WebBot and Chiliac Graphs is November 10th, 11th, and 12th, so they're all within spitting distance of each other, and the question becomes whether or not it's some kind of massive terrorist attack, whether or not it's, Obama just once again proves that he's George Bush with a tan. If you like George Bush, you're going to love Barack Obama because he's done everything that George Bush did except better, bigger, badder, and blacker than George Bush did. And, he hasn't done a single thing. He's not this hopey, changey guy. And, you'll notice the guys that are all for peace are the guys that get shot. The minute they get in and say, no, I'm going to go to war, I'm going to blow stuff up, I'm going to do whatever, you never get rid of those guys. Those are the guys that are deified.
Right.
And about 3 or 4 weeks ago, Obama had some kind of deal behind the scenes where they handed him the keys to the kingdom and said, we're going to give you everything that you want, so because you've been a good boy and you've carried out the agenda for whatever it is. What I'm afraid of is that when you consider the first Bretton Woods conference is what put together, the International Monetary Fund, which really put together the current tax system that we really have.
Right.
You're looking at something that's going to be international and United Nations based, which means Bretton Woods 2 would probably mean that Soros would set up some kind of World Bank, would probably dump the Federal Reserve note into, I guess, what you call a basket of currencies, sort of like a reserve currency that's a lot of different things. But Soros has made the rather outrageous statement that the model of American capitalism no longer functions because he and his pals have been responsible for completely destroying it. But that the model what they want to model everything on, and this is what you can tell what the New World Order is going to be when George Soros says it. It usually happens. He finds that the Chinese communist system of capitalism is a, quote, much better model. So that gives you an idea of where he sees all this going.
Okay, that brings us around to China, okay? And before we get to my question about China, and at some point we have to wrap this up, and thank you, Sean, for being so amazing. First of all, what about the global settlements? Have you heard of that? And do you have a point of view on that? And then can we move to China, because I want to ask you some questions about China.
No, I can't really, I can't really speak to the global settlements. I hope they happen. I hope something occurs. A lot of people ask me things like, well, what's going to happen with the Iraqi dinar? And, that's going to revalue. And again, I point out to people that the current revaluation of the dinar in Iraq is a completely different cat of a different color than the revaluation of the dinar in Kuwait. Currently, the Iraqi dinar is actually linked to the U.S. dollar. The Iraqi dinar would only probably revalue when the United States left Iraq, which is not going to happen anytime soon. So there's all these people that bought. I mean, the only good news is that I think Donald Trump, put some chump change into it. I think he put like $30 million into buying dinars. If they revalue, they can revalue it like, 3 cents. But there's people talking about, that's going to go up to $1 or $3, and they're all going to be millionaires. And again, if you did that to the Iraqi dinar, you would completely wipe out the Iraqi economy now. And as far as the global settlements go, I know that Leo Wanta, there's a claim that Wanta has got these billions of dollars, and yet he keeps getting beat up in court every time he goes. They've said that he's insane. They've said that he belongs in a mental institution. I just don't see anybody out there with billions of dollars that they're going to dump on us. The good thing that I see, again, is that the thing that they're really afraid of. I mean, let's take the flipping of the planet thing. They're fixing that. The sun going crazy. There's all kinds of weird stuff going on around the sun right now that I don't know if it's our technology or extraterrestrial technology or whatever else. The thing they're most afraid of is us. The thing is that they don't know how to handle an awake and aware population, which is one of the things that seems to be the guarantee of what 2012 represents, is that 2012, and remember, if you look at where the calendar begins in 3115 BC, the Hindu Vedic calendar actually has the age of the Kali Yuga beginning in 3115 BC. The Hebrew calendar begins within about 50 to 100 years of 3115 BC. The Mayan calendar begins in 3115 BC and ends on December 21st of 2012. And scientists have told us that there was a mass glaciation of the planet, a huge ice sheet that basically froze most of the Earth. It created the frozen woolly mammoths. It created the Austrian Iceman that they found, which was one of the best preserved sort of, the skeletons of its day. Entire mummified guy. It created the ice sheets in Peru. And again, this is Harvard and Princeton going down there and
so
saying,
what you're saying is you think that this is going to happen.
This happened in days, to complete my sentence. This happened in days, not years, not decades, not thousands of years.
Right.
This happened virtually overnight, which is when one calendar ends and another one begins, which does not bode well for 2012. But what does bode well for it is the Mayans say that what the ninth wave represents is that the winds of change will blow away hierarchies. That's happening. That these winds of change will occur where one man cannot and will not continue to be the slave of another, which is what you're seeing in the Middle East and what you're about ready to see in the United States. You're seeing the collapse of the Federal Reserve System, primarily because if you look at the astrology of Pluto now moving through Capricorn, you're going to see banking systems destroyed, monetary systems destroyed. But at the same time, you're going to see earthquakes and oil and infrastructure, all these things that Capricorn rules. And as Pluto moves through Capricorn, we have the same astrological alignments as occurred right now in our history, as occurred between 1766 and about 1780. So all the planets are in the same place, including we're going through a Saturn return right now with Saturn in Libra. We're going through the first Pluto return in the country's history. Everything is lining for another massive American revolution. Again, the revolution of this. And the biggest part about this is Aries, as of March, I think, January, I think it is. But right when the revolutions and the revolts began with in Egypt, you had Aries, you had Uranus, which is the planet of change and nuclear energy and violent shocks, but that moved into Aries, and that's moving in, and that's going to be in Aries for about the next 7 years.
Yeah.
So the same revolution that you're seeing in the Middle East is now spreading into Europe. It's already gone through Greece. You're going to see that same revolt begin in Portugal, in Germany, in England, and eventually, as state governments begin to collapse, it's going to then transfer here to the United States because people are just going to be mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. And the veils, it's all about the veils being ripped away. The word apocalypse means that which is hidden being revealed, that things have been occulted or hidden from our view. And that is going to be what then rips everything away. And I'm really worried that we need to be at the crest of that wave so we can control the trajectory of what the new civilization is going to look like, rather than leaving it to the Obamas and the George Soroses and the Clinton, Rockefeller, Bush syndicate guys, because they know the chaos is coming. Everything we've talked about tonight, they know. And
okay,
Sean,
thank you.
Okay.
That's lovely. It actually, there seems to be some kind of shorting out happening right there while you were winding that up. I'm not sure if it was on your end or on my end, but at any rate, that's absolutely superb for you to cover all of that in this span of time, and I really do appreciate it. We haven't really had a chance to allow people to ask questions, and you know, we've been going now for 2 hours and 15 minutes actually. So I do want to thank you. If there's any last words you want to say, go right ahead. And I think we've covered pretty much everything that I was hoping we would cover.
It's what I always try to say. What I always try to wrap things up with is that each civilization has its own motto. You have the Egyptians that talk about.
Okay, your sound is actually going right here. I'm not sure what happened. You might want to unplug your earphones and give it a shot like that.
Hear me now? Okay.
No, it's all garbled. You know, I can tell that you're trying to talk, but it's very, very bad.
Let me see if I can fix it. Stand by. Okay. Can you hear me now?
No, actually, it's actually a little worse. Are you able to take your earphones off?
I think I reset everything. Hold on.
All right. Okay. Why don't we end it right here?
Actually, you're the one breaking up. It's not me. It's you now. All right.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sean. Let's quit while we're ahead. Thank you so much. You're going to be appearing at my Awake and Aware conference, just so everyone knows, in September, the 23rd, 24th, and 25th, and that will be wonderful for people to get an update at that time from you. And hopefully we'll talk again between now and then. Okay.
All right, Jerry. Thank you a lot. Really appreciate you. Let me have your show again.
Okay. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.